shareholders, and of course the representatives of Treasury who are here, and obviously to the members. And I see we have in Kululeko, are there 13 sort of NGOs and others here with the 13 submissions that go for oral consideration today. Is that correct? All of them here?
Yes, Chair. There are few that are still missing, but I'm hoping they are coming, Chairperson.
Good.
I'll check.
And you said earlier that COSATU wants the sequence changed, right?
That's correct, Chairperson. But Matthew is already here. But since we have changed the programs, yeah, they are fine with it.
Matthew, it's fine. So shall we go with Matthew? Matthew, can you go ahead? You've got 10 minutes. Can we plead with people to stick with the 10 minutes? You see, we're not in our homes or in the parliament. So, you know, we don't have control over certain logistical and other arrangements. Because there are so many submissions, although some of them overlap, we can extend the time by at least half an hour. So we don't have to finish at 9 p.m. Sorry, we can finish later if we have to. But I see, my battery's going. I'm sorry about the clumsiness, but there's nothing we can do. I mean, I cannot connect with my 4G and my computer won't open either.
Yeah, mute, Chairperson.
Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, you see, that's again use of the cell phone. It fell and I had to retrieve it. All right, I'm hoping to move it to iPad shortly. Kululeko will help me with that in a moment. Okay, so over to COSATU. Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just be home in 2 minutes' time. Is it possible for somebody else to go?
Yes, of course. Okay. All right, then Kululeko, can you help me? I can't open my computer. So can you tell me who's number 2 on the list as we had it then yesterday?
It was the South African Medical Research Council, Chairperson.
Are they here? Are they here?
Yes.
Okay, over to you. 10 minutes. I'm going to monitor you on the cell phone stopwatch. Thank you.
Okay. Just give me a minute to share. Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present at this public hearing. I will be looking at I've just put on this presentation outline slide. I just want to jump right into it for lack of time. I would like to talk about the health effects or harmful effects of nicotine to begin with, because we often hear, but we know that nicotine is one of the most addictive drugs available in the world, and it's not harmless because it has effects on the body. And this paper that I'm sharing with you, where 90 studies were
hello. Kululeko,
actually summarized some of the health effects of nicotine to show that it can create a process or Can you hear me?
In Kululeko, yes,
Hello?
there's a problem on my side, but
Can
is
you
it
hear me?
No, Chair, the problem is with Catherine. Can you move around, Catherine? You keep on breaking.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought it's me. Okay, good, but fine. She'll find a way, yeah. Are you there, Catherine? Hello, Catherine. In Kululeko, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Chairperson, and I can see Catherine. She's still here. I'm sure she's moving around.
All right, okay. Shall we move on to somebody else while she finds her way around? We can come back to her. She can have a full 10 minutes. In Kululeko?
Yes, Chairperson. The following stakeholder is Life After Coal campaign.
Are they here?
I didn't see their rep here unless they just came in.
We're here, Honorable Chair. It's
Oh, yeah.
Brandon Abdinor.
Right, please go for it. You're at 18:07. You got 10 minutes. Thank
Please
you.
confirm if you can hear me.
Oh, we're back with Elizabeth. Elizabeth?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
All right. Yeah, we can hear you now. So you are, sorry about that. We were moving on to the next submission, but we can go for you. Can you finish your submission, please?
Okay, sorry.
It's not your fault. No, we understand.
Frozen. Now my computer is frozen. Interesting.
Shall we come back to you later, Catherine?
Yes, please. Because my
Okay, we'll come
computer
back
is
to you towards
frozen
the
now.
end. Yeah. Okay, over then to Life After Co. Can you go for it, please?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yeah, it's Brandon Abdinor here. Thanks for the opportunity to make a submission. Honorable members, in April this year, we saw floods in KZN that destroyed thousands of homes and livelihoods, and over 400 people lost their lives. That event was linked to climate change. 4 years ago, we saw the drought in the Western Cape known as Day Zero. Again, it was poverty-stricken urban areas where most of the suffering was experienced, where people ended up in conflict situations while queuing for water, and neighbors turned against each other. That event was made 3 times more intense by climate change. And time again, we're seeing at-risk and often poor communities that suffer as a result of climate change impacts. And this is one of the important aspects of climate justice that we need to see. How do those who've contributed least to the problem, in fact, no longer have to bear the worst of the impacts? So these events show us, and many others, that we really need to adapt to climate change, and we need to do so urgently. I'm calling in from COP27, the climate negotiations. Our negotiators, led by Marcelo Kekana and Minister Creasy, are doing their best and pushing hard for adaptation finance, for the money that should come from the developed world to support us in these adaptation needs. But the bad news is this money is not coming. Just like it hasn't come for the last 5 years, and at this point in time, it doesn't look like it will be coming in the foreseeable future. That is unjust. That's not climate justice. Those nations caused a lot of the climate change that we're seeing, and obviously as a country, we need to fight for that. But we need money for adaptation, and where does this money come from? Last month, the World Bank released a country climate and development report. And in that report, it highlights that by 2030, we're going to need 866 billion rand for adaptation. By 2050, that goes up to 2.4 trillion rand. And again, we ask where the money comes from. One of the recommendations from this World Bank report is that it must come from carbon taxes. This is fresh information, but it's not new information, and it's widely recognized around the world that carbon taxes are a means of raising the necessary funding for some of these response measures. The need for deep and urgent greenhouse gas emissions has never been more evident, and the effectiveness of the Carbon Tax Act in helping to ensure such reduction is critically important. And we need to have an act that effectively ensures that the necessary emissions reductions can be undertaken. Global greenhouse gas emissions are continuing to rise. We saw a 5% dip during the COVID pandemic, but they've come back up. They might be leveling out. It's an open question at this point in time, but what they're not doing is going down at the rate that they need to. We need to be halving emissions by 2030. And this is where the Carbon Tax Act comes in to be one of the most important tools to ensure that that can happen. Since we started burning coal in 1850 and other fossil fuels, we have emitted 2,400 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. And in order to stay within a safe limit of 1.5 degrees of warming, and safe in inverted commas, because we can see it's already not safe, we as a planet can only emit a further 300 gigatons. So this gives a clear indication of that we're at the end of being able to burn fossil fuels in the way that we have. South Africa is currently not on target to meeting its Paris Agreement goals of holding increases to a global temperature of well below 2 and preferably to 1.5 degrees. If we look at our NDC, which is our Paris Agreement target, only the lower end of the range comes close to the 1.5 degrees. And it's worth noting when we look at these targets that a fair share adjustment has already been applied. So that looks at historical accountability, the development needs of a country, as well as a country's capacity to decarbonize. So that adjustment has already been made. The carbon tax and an effective carbon tax is even more important now from the point of view that the 2022 climate change bill, which is currently with the Portfolio Committee on Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, provides for an allocation of carbon budgets to emitters as a foundational tool for compelling these reductions. In 2018, we saw a version of the bill that made exceeding the carbon budget an offense. In a 2021 version of the bill, this was taken out, but it spoke of levying a higher carbon tax rate against those who exceed their budgets. In the current version of the bill, even that has been taken out, but we know from the Minister of Finance that this method of ensuring that carbon budgets are not exceeded will be via the Carbon Tax Act. From our point of view, we don't believe that's enough. We believe that should be an offense, but nonetheless, we do support a carbon tax being levied on excessive emissions as one form of incentive. So we welcome an increase in the carbon tax rate, but from our point of view, it should be much more than what is in the amendment bill, and that the rates that are currently there are not actually high enough to compel meaningful greenhouse gas emissions reduction. In the memorandum on the bill, there's reference made to an IMF proposal, which suggests that carbon tax for developing nations should be between $25 and $50 per ton. We're not sure which IMF proposal is being referred to, but if we look at a report from the High-Level Commission on Carbon Prices, which came out of COP22, we see that South Africa, along with China, Russia, Brazil, it was recommended that a rate of $75 per ton be levied. It must be pointed out, though, that if we look at what's called the social cost of carbon, which is a measure of the true cost of greenhouse gas emissions on the economy, it's generally held that that should be between $150 and $300 per ton. So we're talking about a lot more money than is currently being envisaged. Honorable members, we also concerned about the allowances provided in the Carbon Tax Act, that these still remain in place, which could dramatically reduce the effectiveness of the carbon tax. Currently, emitters are eligible for between 60 and 95% reduction of carbon tax liability as a result of these allowances, and we suggest that this limit is simply too high, as it would leave many greenhouse gas emitters with only a very limited carbon tax exposure, and that's not going to do the necessary to ensure emissions reduction. We have one of the most carbon-intensive economies in the world, and this is something that is going to punish us economically. We're seeing other parts of the world starting to levy carbon taxes or border adjustment mechanisms, which will make our exports vulnerable and further compromise the economy. Not necessarily strictly within the ambit, but we also think that carbon taxes collected should be earmarked or ring-fenced in some form so that the money that's actually received gets used for climate response. Honorable members, we have a principle in our environmental law called polluter pays. In other words, that party which causes the damage should pay for the rectification. When we see a dam burst in Jagersfontein, we want those polluters to be held to account. When we see a chemical factory in Durban burn down and a whole lot of unpermitted chemicals destroying ecosystems, rivers, and compromising the safety of people.
You've got, sorry, you've got less than 2 minutes. Could you focus on concrete amendments to the bill that you process through the NA and you're unhappy with them? Because that's a priority of the NCOP. What is it beyond what the NA did that you feel has to be done? If you could focus on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yeah, basically, we need to see a higher tax rate. I mean, we're seeing a kickback against what is there by the emitters now. They want the rate not to be increased. They want it to be deferred for however long. We need to see a high rate. We need to see something in the order of moving towards $75 per ton as soon as possible, so that we can actually see the necessary incentives for emission reduction. We also want to see these allowances dropped away as quickly as possible so that, again, the carbon tax is meaningful and will have the desired effect of incentivizing emission reduction.
Okay, are you done?
Done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. I just want to draw the attention of the meeting to the fact that I'm unfortunately unable to connect via my iPad. And I'm having, the Wi-Fi is not connecting here. So I'm using the 4G and it's complicated. So I'm going to unfortunately not have my video on, and I'll stick with my iPhone for now. So next would be National Council Against Smoking. Now, before we have the next submission, can I draw the attention to our friends from civil society that these are not Section 76 bills where the NCOP has the same power to process a bill and the same authority over it, more or less, as the NA. These are 75 or 77 bills. They process very differently. And the key focus when we have hearings on our side is what is there in these tax bills that have implications for the provinces that you think we should actually carefully reconsider. Remember, colleagues, these are tax bills. So whether you're living in some remote part of the Northern Cape or in the middle of Johannesburg, you'll pay the same income tax if you're earning the same, or company tax if your profits are more or less the same. So all I'm asking is, remember, we are bound by what the Constitution provides for and what legislation provides for on our powers and functions. And, we've urged people over the years, we understand that it's no use rehashing what you've done on the NA side. We focus particularly on what are the implications for the provinces. And as you will appreciate, when it comes to tax bills, all of these things are more or less national. So can you focus on that? Or what is it that the National Assembly has done that you've went there and made representations and they turned down and you would like us to give further consideration to it? Remember, finally, we can't amend these bills. What we can do is go to our house, that's National Council of Provinces, write a report and say, we think that clause such and such needs to be looked at again. These are proposed amendments to it. And then they will, at the level of the chair of the House, refer it to the Speaker, and then the committee has the choice on the NA side to reject what we're saying or accept it. But they're not obliged, unlike with 76 bills. So please focus on those aspects that I set out to you. Now, Frank Jenkins, our Legal Services Unit representative here, are you here? Frank? Frank's not here, is he in Kulileko?
He was here, Chairperson.
Chair,
He's here.
Okay, so have I said anything that's not quite right or over-condensed or not clear enough? Can you help?
No,
Am I
no,
right
Chair.
in what I'm saying?
Yes, no, 100%. And this is the focus of the NCOP, as well as looking at what has happened in the NA and to bring about what can be done concretely with the bills, looking from a provincial, if there's a provincial impact, because that is the mandate of the NCOP, Chair. No, you've articulated correctly. Thank you.
All right, there we are then. Can we go along those lines, please? We have raised this with many of you before, including those of you here, but fine, we can't stop you from saying whatever you want, but just look at the value of your 10 minutes and use it as best as you can, given the parameters in which we look at bills of this nature in the NCOP. Okay, next is National Council Against Smoking. 10 minutes to you, my friend.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, of course we can.
Oh, great. So the National Council Against Smoking is going to be making a presentation to your committee, and that's jointly hosted at University of Pretoria by myself as the director of the National Council and a professor of public health. My colleague, Dr. Nyatanza, is also here, who's a legal expert. Going straight to the presentation, sorry. We're going to be presenting on the e-cigarette tax, excise tax. But before we go ahead, I think it's important to contextualize the presentation. These are products that deliver nicotine electronically. So they be an open system where you can just basically pushing as much e-liquid or electronic as it's commonly called, e-liquid into the tank and smoke it to get the nicotine. Or it could be closed system where it's pre-filled, like a port system, or what we call the common disposable system, usually contain much smaller liquid that's already pre-filled. But we acknowledge that this keeps moving or it keeps evolving in the market. And this is across the provinces. You find them in malls, in pharmacy stores, and you can see it's not by accident that the pictures on the walls they are female, because they target female, as we know in South Africa. The tobacco industry in particular has not been able to penetrate female, but it seems like the e-cigarette industry seems to be targeting males, females and youth. We also have here, advertisement on TV, which was obviously put off because it was not obviously, they could not defend exactly those claims. And you then all of a sudden have all these billboards as well. If you do not read very well, you can easily miss the E and say cigarettes save lives, and it can't really be misleading. And all the gains we made in tobacco control can easily be wiped out. And I'm going to show some evidence to that extent. And of course, again, this is a launch of a very highly addictive nicotine salt, because you can have it as a free base or nicotine salt. Nicotine salt hits your brain much faster, and this was launched just in March 2001 with the live streamed youth events. I think it's also important for the community to know this is basically the study we did across the 9 provinces. I've just put up this picture for you to understand exactly what the implication is. Those who understand the Western Cape, right there in Cape Town, Mitchell's Plain and Kalicha, particularly Mitchell's Plain, has a very high concentration of smokers. Industry have always wanted us to believe that this is positioned to help smokers quit. But when you see the distribution of the vape shops, they're actually in richer areas and around universities where youths are concentrated. And we also looked at the model, and the model showed that the higher the density of these vape shops where they sell them, the higher the odds that you have e-cigarette user closer to, and also the closer you are to the area, particularly for young participants of this study. This was a study that looked at 18,000 South Africans that completed the online survey. Importantly is that despite the uptake, people were able to quit for short term, but in the long term, it was actually suppressing giving up smoking, and they were more likely to relapse. And this is the picture over the last 10 years that we've been monitoring e-cigarettes. As you can see, for this young 16 to 34-year-old, smoking is going up, e-cigarette is going up. It suggests that they are not switching. If they were switching, you would have had e-cigarettes going up and smoking coming down. In fact, smoking accelerated in more recent years. So it suggests that e-cigarette definitely is not producing what the industry would like us to believe. More worrying is this study reported by Professor Richard Van Zyl-Smit from Cape Town, looking at 9 high schools. Children at the age of 14 initiated e-cigarette. Already about 15% of those kids, that's 1 out of every 7 child, was already using e-cigarette at the age of 14. It is really a problem. Not only that they're using them, you can see they're very addictive because they're probably using the nic salt. 60% of them had to use within the first hour of waking up, and a third within the 5 minutes of waking up. We also have this to suggest that South Africans are actually worried about e-cigarettes, and many of them, over 61%, believe that e-cigarette advertisement and promotion may make adolescents think about smoking traditional cigarettes, and they're in support of actually regulating e-cigarette as traditional cigarettes are regulated, particularly putting restriction on advertisement. So indeed, across South Africa, there's support to regulate e-cigarette. Again, the picture will show you from retail data that subsequent to the lockdown and the launch of Vuse, the fruit flavor took off in a very phenomenal manner in terms of uptake and sales. I'm going to go straight back to the crux of the matter. This is the current market picture that we got from the retail data, we agree that this may not represent the full picture of South African market, but it gives us an idea of the distribution of what is being used in the market or what's being sold in the market. So the closed system represent about 30% of sales, looking at a combination of nicotine and volume of 4,700 brand counts. And then the open system represents about the remaining, which is about 70% of sales. But most of that would be between 10 and 30 mils. And that's why it's important to put this in context when we propose why there should be an amendment to the proposal of R2.90 per mil. So again, 30% 1 to 2 mils, 61%, 30 to 30 mils, and 9% over 3 mil. We were able to also confirm this from this survey, which we did with the Human Science Research Council, the South African Social Attitude Survey conducted in 2021. Again, as about 37% of e-cigarette users said they actually use the closed system. And of course, you have the distribution of prevalence by daily or non-daily use. So we were able to then look at an estimation of how many mils of e-liquid is being sold and how much will the Treasury be able to raise at R2.90 compared to what we are proposing. So these are weighted counts. So we estimate currently about 1.9 million South Africans are using e-cigarette, with 400,000 using them daily and 1.5 million using them non-daily, with open system as we have it there. Just as a quick calculation of how many mils used, we estimate user annually. Based on this user count, it's about 286 million, depending on what you use for the closed system, between 2 and 3 mil. But for the purpose of our presentation, we're going to use 250 million mils, which the BAT presented to this committee some time ago, as the annual says. So we are proposing that if you use the R2.90 as currently proposed, excise as a percentage of retail price will come really very low, and to make no difference, particularly for the disposable or the closed system, which seem to be what the youths are able to use, and therefore it would make no public health advances. So
you're at 8 minutes or slightly over, if you can round up.
Thank you. So we're proposing to move this to R5 per mil, starting with a flat rate of 50 Rand on those closed system, and anything beyond the 10 mil should be then R5 per mil. And that will give you a much more reasonable excise as a share of retail price, as you see in the last between 30% and 50%. Again, we could, if we do a R2.90 on a 250 million mil, the Treasury will generate 725 million or 725 million. But if we go by the proposal we have put forward, Treasury will generate about 2.3 billion, which will be very important for all the provinces to take care of some of the health consequences of using nicotine. I'm not going to go then into the detail. We also believe that the proposal, the current tax proposed on cigarettes, is below the inflation, substantially below the inflation rate, and therefore affordability is not going to be affected. Indeed, that should be the goal, and therefore we propose a 10% rather than the 5.5%. Just for purposes of concluding, illicit trade should not be the challenge here, because that's a crime. We should do an enforcement, and even when Treasury moved excise by 8%, actually we started seeing even a reduction in illicit from the ban, which was about 90% illicit down to about 50% currently. In conclusion, excise tax on cigarette and ends is a public health imperative, and the public health goal should be to prevent youth uptake and promote cessation. The market is indeed complex, but we propose this, the protocol we have proposed would not only prevent youth uptake, but would generate much more revenue for Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is tobacco, alcohol, and gambling advocacy. Are you here?
Yes, I am here, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen.
Thank you. Yeah, we see your screen. We see this you on the screen there, yes? Your slides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all the members of the committee. Let me say at the outset that most of the focus here is on tobacco tax, but of course the electronic devices are equally important. Tobacco increases the carbon load on the country and indeed on the universe, and we'll have a look at those few things. Oh, my slide is not advancing, I wonder. So first of all, we must understand that there's no right anywhere to smoke. Not in the Constitution, nowhere. What the Constitution tells us is we have a choice. The problem with the choice of smoking is that the choice is very quickly removed by addiction and replaced by your compulsion to smoke. The same applies to electronic devices. There's no right anywhere to use electronic devices. So start off with our recommendations. This is a bit of the what, and then we'll go through a bit of the why so that we come back to what it is that you need to do. We propose an increase of at least 20% on the excise. 25% is better, and I'll explain why. Increasing the excise beyond inflation is just a minor detail because excise is about half of the retail cost. What you need to do is increase the retail selling price, the cost to consumer, by inflation plus 15%. In Australia, they do it by inflation plus 12.5%. We're already lagging behind, so I think we should aim for inflation plus 15%. Very recently, Stats SA published statistics that the inflation in August, I think, was 7.6%. It had come down a little from July at 7.8%. So if inflation is 7.6%, then we have to increase the excise portion of the retail selling price by about 25% to result in the cost to consumer going up by inflation plus 15%. And I repeat, and Lacan mentioned it, illicit trade is a very serious problem in South Africa. But tax will not increase it. Do not believe the industry when they tell you that. It's nonsense. Illicit trade is a criminal act. It's got nothing to do with tax. There are countries that got very low tax and there's still illicit trade. We need to use tax as a health tool in order to be successful. It needs to be applied very importantly, consistently, every year, same process, increase the retail selling price or increase the tax in such a way that the retail selling price goes up by inflation plus 15%. And it must do that progressively. The more expensive, the less affordable, the more we increase the quitting rates, we reduce prevalence and we reduce consumption. The same principles apply to electronic devices, heated products and e-liquids and everything else. We need to get people to stop using them and to stop smoking. The biggest tool we have, banning advertising and health warnings, all of those things work and they contribute to our success. But the biggest tool we have is cost to consumer. Increase the price and you reduce prevalence, you reduce consumption, and you save on public health care costs. And this is, Mr. Chair and committee, what I really want you to do. Make the health tax benefit health. It's not the other name we used to use for tax. It's not that. That gives a wrong impression of what the tax is about. It's a health tax. And here on the right-hand side of this picture is a book published earlier this year by the World Health Organization. And they call it health taxes, policies and practices. I can make it available for any of the committee members if you want it. So what do we lose if we achieve the goal that we have, that there's zero smoking? You make the tax so that in the next, say, 5 or 10 years, nobody's taken up more smoking and everybody who smoked quit or died, because that's what happens, they die. So we lose nothing. The money spent on tobacco tax is not lost. The money spent on tobacco tax is going to be used in other areas of society. It's going to be spent on products that use labor that are going to increase employment. So what is gained if everybody stops smoking? It's everything. We save lives, the lives of breadwinners particularly. We save the lives of teachers and MPs and members of the National Council of Provinces. Public healthcare costs go down. We use less chemical pollutants. Our youth are less likely to take up smoking if we reduce the use of electronic devices, which ultimately very often lead, and there's evidence to show that, to the use of combustible products. We have fewer packs and less wastage. No job losses. Cigarettes are made by machines, not by people. And electronic devices, as far as I know, are not manufactured in South Africa. They're all imported. So where are the jobs there? In the retail sales of those products? That's minuscule. More jobs will be created in industries which need more labor to produce that when the money spent on cigarettes is spent on other products. Just think about the pollution, and Brandon spoke about carbon tax. Cigarettes contribute to the carbon load on the country. We smoke about 24 billion cigarettes a year in South Africa. That's 1.2 billion packs. Now I measured the packs, and if you lay out 10,000 packs in a row and 10,000 rows, you will get about 57 by 900 meters, and it'll be about 1/4 meter high. Can you picture this? 10 soccer fields knee deep in trash every year. You go to a soccer match, imagine if it was covered, the whole field was covered knee high with tobacco packs. I hope you get that picture. Now let's have a look at the pollution. 24 billion butts, and cigarette butts are single-use plastics. The world is moving away, and South Africa must move away from single-use plastics. We're making progress, but we need to speed it up. We need to take big steps, not baby steps. 120 million kilograms of waste. And what I did there is simply estimate that a butt is 5 grams. You multiply 24 billion by 5, you get a number that I can't even pronounce, and it's 124 million kilograms. That's about 60,000 cars. Now, I haven't put any fancy pictures here to try and persuade you or move you. I want you to close your eyes, please, and picture 60,000 cars in a heap. That's how much cigarette butts waste is every year. And cigarettes is a killer product. This is what we're dealing with. The tax is a way to get rid of it. It's the only consumer product that if you use it as directed by the manufacturer, will kill half its users. So you put it in your mouth, you put a fire at one end, and you suck all that chemicals and smoke and tar and nicotine addictive and poisons into your lungs, going to kill half the consumers prematurely. It's not very different from electronic devices, but we need time. Unfortunately, time will tell us how many people die. We're looking at a disastrous future, unfortunately, in that area. What about
You're at
public
8 minutes,
healthcare?
my friend. Hello.
Thank
8
you.
minutes. You got 2 more minutes if you could round up, please.
Thank you, I will. Public healthcare costs are about 200 billion a year. So how much of this spend is caused by the money we spend on public healthcare costs by what I call the dreaded triple D? We spend about 14.48 billion, which is lost on tobacco-related public healthcare costs. And that's disease, disability, and death. That's what the tax will reduce. That's what the tax will save if you do it right. 25% increase in the current level of excise on tobacco products, and do it similarly for electronic and other devices. The aim is life. We need to save lives, we need to save individuals, we need to save families, and we need to save the environment. It's also about money. It's about the fiscus. But we need to save many lives. We need to save ordinary people. And you spoke about provinces, Mr. Chairman. Tobacco kills people in every province. The youth of 14 that Lacan spoke about who's smoking 7% or whatever that figure was. No, 1 in 7. That's in every province. And he showed those vape shops and electronic device shops are near schools and universities. We need to save our nation, and we need to save the environment. Most of all, we need to save ourselves. So please, Mr. Chairman and committee members, do the right thing. Make the tax system work so that the health tax works for health. I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. I like your style. Very simple, direct, well, passionate too. Others will be passionate maybe in the opposite direction. But I like your very clear, stark presentation, very comprehensible. Whether one agrees or disagrees is subject for discussion, but you presented it very clearly. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I must say, I'm often accused of having too much passion. Whatever that is, I don't know how much.
No, there's no.
Thank you.
No, there's no such thing as, well, there could be, but not in this context, not here, not now. This is your parliament just as much as everybody else's, and this is where you're meant to be heard. British American Tobacco, thank you.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I'm just sharing my screen.
Yep, we see you.
You're able to see it?
Yep.
Thank you for the opportunity to present, and in line with your instruction, I think there are two key main proposals coming from BAT, but again also putting the excise on vaping products into context. From a BAT perspective, we are firmly of the view that the excise needs to be collected from all actors equally to ensure fair competition and an equal playing field for all participants. And what I mean by this, if we put an excise into place and we don't have an excise framework that is workable from an administrative perspective, from a legal perspective, we can have a tax that's introduced but not collected, which ultimately will lead to fiscal evasion. Now, some key considerations, and I don't want to harp too much on the background and the differences of the products and the vaping space, but it's quite important to understand the complexities of the vaping market, as it is a nascent market, which in our view has a lot more unknowns than knowns. And from our perspective, we feel that the ENDS market, so the electronic nicotine delivery systems market in South Africa, accounts for less than 0.5% of the entire nicotine products market in South Africa. There are approximately 10,000 sellers of ENDS products in South Africa. And in that 10,000, there's an overproportioned amount of retailers creating their own e-liquids. Which is quite important. It's known as the do-it-yourself market or segment, where people are mixing nicotine liquid, adding to it, and why it becomes more, well, quite important in the context of the discussion is because this will be an excisable product. And if you are making changes to an excisable product, increasing the volume, that needs to be regulated, and your excise framework needs to cover that. On top of it, there are complex product categories driven by fragmentation, differing products, and multiple actors dealing with those products. Total consumption is assumed to be no greater than 250 million milliliters per annum, which gives you a size of the market and the revenue that can be generated from this excise. Now, one of the other presenters from the University of Pretoria did give a bit of a background to the closed systems versus the open systems, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But from what we are currently seeing in the market, closed systems are currently being imported with hundreds of formats being made available. And then on the open systems, this is where you have the large do-it-yourself segment. And if you walk into any vaping shop, you can see bottles of 10, 15, 20, 30, 80 milliliters, so multiple formats which would need to be regulated by the excise framework and excise laws. So 5 key points for a robust excise system in our view, and this comes to the first proposed amendment that we make. But for the system to work, you'd need a registration system, so you capturing all actors in the supply chain. On top of it, the market is a puff-focused market, so a lot of sales take place on the number of puffs, and if the specific excise instrument is introduced on a per milliliter basis, we feel that it should be mandatory for ML labeling to be put on the outer product packaging. On top of it, we think that a track and trace system with a unique identity code per individual product should be implemented from day one. This would allow SARS enforcement and audit to have a full visibility of the entire supply chain and who's dealing with these products. On top of it, we also need to make sure that we avoid fiscal evasion, and a few people have made statements that excise doesn't lead to illicit trade. However, if you don't have an excise framework and your excise rate is there, this will create incentive for illicit traders. But if the rate is too high and that framework isn't in place, we will land up in a situation from day one where there will be fiscal evasion. And some key points to note, and I can go on, but we haven't had clarity on licensing and registration, bonded movements, the excise account, how rebates will work in this space, payment terms, security around bonded warehouses. So anyone dealing in these products, it would form a customs and excise warehouse. There's strict security requirements from SARS. So based on that, we've said extend the implementation date from 1 June 2023, which is currently in the legislation, to 1 January 2024. And this would allow for the necessary public consultation on a long list of considerations that we've submitted to National Treasury to make the excise framework workable for the introduction of the new excise. I think the other one to put out there is we need a sensible approach to maximize revenue, and you're only going to get the revenue in if you have this excise collection framework. So we commend National Treasury for the amount of analysis that went into determining the R2.90. I think they looked at 373 products in the market, and in one of the early presentations, they did compare the R2.90 to a lot of international rates. We have looked at the analysis done by National Treasury, and per our analysis, we are of the view that the excise should fall anywhere between 70 cents per milliliter and 46 cents per milliliter. And we've also put a structure in place which is quite close to what they're doing or proposed structure in place, which is quite close to what they're doing in Canada, where you have a rate for the first 2 milliliters. So this would prevent fiscal evasion with people pounding down at the lower milliliter levels, not to pay the excise, and then a rate over the 2 milliliters. But that would range from 70 cents to 46 cents, or if you want to look at it the other way around, 46 to 70. On top of it, we also took the analysis done by National Treasury, and we engaged with Oxford Economics to review international rates. And our quote from the Oxford Economic Report: a rate of R1.45 per milliliter should be seen as the upper limit in the South African case. So what Oxford Economics did, they looked at purchasing power, current pricing in the market, did the comparisons on National Treasury's data, and concluded the upper limit should be R1.45. However, they did say that a rate closer to the lower quartile of 70 cents per milliliter would seem more appropriate. And this is aligned with the rate that we determined by our own internal analysis. So I think in closing, and I obviously haven't gone over the 8-minute mark. I just want to say
you have. It's just that member's phoning me. He's, I think, stuck. It's in Jadu. I think he's battling to connect. I shouldn't have kept my phone on. I apologize. No, you're at 8:48.
Okay, very good. So I think in closing, the date of implementation we feel should be extended by a further 6 months to allow for full public participation. The rate should be relooked at based on the extensive analysis that has been supplied to National Treasury. And I think if an appropriate rate is put in, it would give SARS the time to test the administrative framework, to make sure that they're capturing all actors in the supply chain, which back to my first point, would ensure that all actors pay the excise and there isn't fiscal evasion. Thank you, Chair and honourable members.
Thank you. We move over to British American Tobacco. You've done Just Share, sorry, and then we go to Greenpeace, and we go back to the Medical Research Council. Okay, so over then to Just Share, then it's Greenpeace.
Thank you very much. Slideshow from the beginning.
We can see it, certainly.
Excellent. Thank you. Good evening, Honourable Chairperson and members. I'm Robin Hugo, and I'm from non-profit shareholder activism organisation Just Share. We've made, as you would have seen, detailed written submissions in relation to proposed amendments to the carbon tax. So we were going to focus on why businesses' position in relation to the tax is untenable. Thank you for the guidance, Chair. We haven't presented here before. This position of business will also exacerbate climate impacts in provinces. So in this regard, both the deadly KZN floods of April 2022, the day zero drought in the Western Cape have been, as Brandon said, scientifically linked to climate change, the cost of these disasters being borne by at-risk communities and individuals, rather than by emitters who caused the problem in the first place. And then to take you straight to the conclusions, an effective carbon tax rate is the best method to incentivize practices and strategies that will accelerate decarbonization. It's also pivotal for our just transition. So what we recommend is a significant strengthening of the carbon tax so that it complies with expert recommendations. And you will see, Chair, in our written submissions, we provided a detailed table that compares the rate with the global recommendations and in fact with the National Business Initiative as well. And we want government at least to stand firm on its proposed amendments to the Carbon Tax Act, at the very least to revert to the previous version that was published for comment, because since then business has obtained, in fact, even more concessions. So the climate science is crystal clear. To avoid the worst effects of climate change, global greenhouse gas emissions have to fall by about half by 2030. But despite increasingly desperate exhortations to act, emissions keep rising. And what's glaringly obvious from our collective failure to reduce GHGs is that voluntary actions and undertakings have failed to ensure adequate levels of protection from climate change. It's also very clear from the position that fossil fuel companies and their industry associations have taken, both on the carbon tax and the climate change bill, that they seek to continue business as usual emissions for as long as possible, unless doing so is going to be adequately disincentivized with a carbon tax and significant penalties. This in circumstances where it's not controversial that taxing carbon emissions is a powerful tool to change behavior, to redirect capital by altering economic incentives. Carbon pricing is the most effective way of capturing the external costs of emissions to the public and shifting the burden of that damage away from the state and the most vulnerable back to those responsible. So it's based, as you all know, on the long-established principle of environmental management that the polluter should pay. If carbon were priced to reflect the actual costs of emission to society, this would be transformative in limiting the worst impacts of the climate crisis. Corporate interference in policymaking and implementation aimed at weakening and delaying regulatory action to tackle climate change is a key reason globally for the failure to take adequate climate action. This often manifests itself in high-level public positions of support for the Paris goals, but closed-door undermining of climate action. Besides delaying the reduction of global carbon emissions and the climate and human rights crisis that has resulted from this delay, corporate climate lobbying has cost governments significant time and deprived them of invaluable financial resources for mitigation and adaptation. Now, businesses' September joint position on the carbon tax is a prime example. Business purports to commend government's commitment to decarbonize, but then calls for it to take a series of actions which would have the opposite effect. So only considering higher carbon price after 2035, only after more detailed analysis of what they call viable mitigation and socioeconomic considerations, delaying annual carbon tax increases beyond CPI plus 2% until at least 2030 to allow for reviewing and aligning different policies and retaining and increasing tax-free allowances. Who is responsible for this position? These are the associations. Sasol, the country's biggest private GHG emitter, one of the world's top 100 corporate emitters, and the self-proclaimed largest point source GHG emitter on Earth, that is its Secunda operation, is a member of and has a leadership position in every one of these associations. There are many reasons that this organized business position damages South Africa. Our carbon tax, including the current proposed amendments, is already too low to be effective, even if we were to ignore the significant tax-free allowances, which, as you will know, range from 60 to 95%. Expert views demonstrate this rate is far too small to create the necessary incentivization to encourage a just transition, to ensure that the polluter pays, and to ensure adequate GHG emission reductions to limit the worst impacts of the climate crisis. Businesses' argument that there needs to be alignment with carbon budgets is incorrect. This is purely an excuse for further delay. It is also completely untenable to argue, as fossil fuel companies and their associations do, that no existing authorized operation should be impacted by climate regulation. Remember that industry has never been legally required to limit GHGs before. This is simply an argument to continue with business as usual. What is more, fossil fuel companies have had more than enough time to prepare for the tax. Following about a decade of intense opposition and lobbying, the tax was introduced in 2019 and then only in stages. The first phase, with tax-free allowances up to 95%, was to run until the end of 2022, the second until 2030. But in February 2022, the finance minister announced the extension of the first phase for 3 years. But even in the face of this significant concession from government, organized business has now doubled down on its opposition to any increases in the tax rate. What has happened is that fossil fuel companies and their associations have essentially co-opted the concept of justice in the transition to delay action by ignoring the devastating social and economic impacts of climate change and of failing to tackle it, and instead setting up a false dichotomy between economic growth, poverty alleviation and development, and the transition to low carbon technologies and renewable energy systems. This ongoing lobbying, pushback, and delay in the implementation of a meaningful tax also, of course, deprives the national fiscus of much needed funds. This in circumstances where industry claims the tax is unaffordable. But in the first quarter of this year, the world's largest energy companies made almost $100 billion in profit. By way of example, on 22 August, it was reported in the press that Sasol regarded the proposed increases in the carbon tax as posing a significant risk to its business, and warned that these could cause it to curtail operations and green initiatives. On the very next day, it posted a 147% jump in full-year core profit. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres referred to the enormous profits made by energy companies as grotesque greed, stating that—
You're at 8 minutes or thereabouts. If you can round up in the next 2 minutes, please.
It is immoral for oil and gas companies to be making record profits from the energy crisis on the backs of the poorest people and communities. He called for taxation of these excessive profits to support the most vulnerable. This chairperson starkly demonstrates that the industries overwhelmingly responsible for the levels of carbon in the atmosphere remain hopelessly, inadequately disincentivized to change the way they do business. Delaying emission cuts now mean the majority of people in South Africa suffer more later. Claiming that the carbon tax will have dire socioeconomic consequences ignores the very real socioeconomic risks associated with delaying the transition, as well as the current and future impacts of failing to mitigate climate change. We are one of the most carbon-intensive economies in the world, which poses a serious risk to our economic competitiveness. Fossil fuel interests maintain they have the interests of the broader economy at heart when they resist the carbon tax. They're actually acting in their own self-interests while placing the rest of the economy at increasing risk of the trade consequences of failing to decarbonize. Failing to take more significant steps to reduce emissions in the short and medium term will require steeper and deeper emission reduction cuts in future, with more severe consequences for our economy and the majority of people in South Africa. Thank you, Chair.
Hi, Chair. Chairperson. Person, he is disconnected from the platform. I'll come back quickly. speak now.
Right.
Okay, guys, we are still trying to connect the chairperson. There is a bit of a problem on his side. Oh, Mr. Dutoit.
Gululego, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. The chairperson is still trying to connect. He has asked me to ask you to continue so long with the two stakeholders.
Thank you, Gululego. The next presenter, you can proceed, please.
Thank you so much. Can
We can see your slides.
Mr. Dutoit, did you get that?
Yes, and Gululego, we are proceeding. I can see the next presenter's slides on the screen. Greenpeace Africa submission on the tax law amendment bill. So
Yes,
the
sir.
presenter can start presenting. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks, sir. Tandile, you can start.
apologies, it seems that when I share my screen that my audio cuts out.
And Gululego, can you perhaps share the screen and then Tandile can just give input?
Okay, I'll try on my side. Can you see the screen?
Not yet
It's
on my
busy
side.
loading. There we go. Thank you, Tandile. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you so much to the NCOP for allowing Greenpeace Africa the opportunity to make a presentation tonight on the carbon tax and the amendments to it. Greenpeace Africa is an independent environmental campaigning organization that campaigns and advocates on just transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy and energy efficiency. In the interest of time, I will be going through the first couple of slides on the climate imperative, but maybe just to highlight that some of the issues we'll be speaking to tonight is our support for the carbon pricing, as well as the imperative for the carbon pricing to continue to increase in its cost. We'll be objecting to the extension of phase 1, as well as the double incentives that are included in the bill, and also objecting to the issue of sequestration. So if you can go to the next slide. I'd like to just emphasize that the climate change will have devastating consequences on people and poverty. We've already started to see some of these taking place, as my colleagues have mentioned, in KZN. Just to highlight that the IPCC Working Group 2 on Impacts, Adaptation and Vulnerability has highlighted some of these issues. And given that South Africa is such a huge emitter of carbon dioxide and driving the climate catastrophe further, we cannot afford to make measures that are incremental so as to only be marginally effective effective. Next slide, please. So we've already delayed significantly the adaptation of the implementation of the Carbon Tax Act, largely to the as a result of carbon majors, the likes of Sasol delaying it and business lobby as well. So in the just to provide context of how inefficient the carbon pricing in its current iteration is, it is basically for the ton of carbon, the price of a cup of coffee. And in some instances with the allowances that have been provided, it's as cheap as 6 Rand. And I think we can all agree the only thing you can buy with that these days is airtime, and that doesn't last very long. So Greenpeace Africa is in support of a carbon tax on the greenhouse gas. And we are, next slide, please. We're in support of a higher tax price, and we would propose that that tax price be in accordance with what has been advised by the high level commission on carbon pricing. And just this slide provides context of what a decent carbon pricing would look like. But if we can move to the next slide, please. So a lower band of carbon pricing as proposed by the EU is calling for carbon pricing of 30 euros per ton, and that is in a scenario that is in towards decarbonizing towards 2060. Next slide, please. But I think in accordance with what has been stipulated by our government as our contribution for our nationally determined contributions, which is proposing a recommended band of 350 to 420 metric tons of carbon dioxide, the proposed price of carbon as it stands in South Africa is incompatible with the commitments that we've put forward as a country. And it's important that recognizing that this act straddles a number of departments, that it's important that there's alignment in terms of what these proposed measures are and how they're implemented, especially considering how important the carbon tax is as a part of South Africa's mitigation efforts. So it's important that that the Treasury recognizes this and ensures that there's alignment between the Carbon Tax Act and the amendments to it, as well as the NDCs as we've put forward to the global community on climate action. Next page, please. So the Minerals Energy Council, MUSA, a business lobby as a whole, has stated that closure of businesses, job losses, and exacerbation of poverty and other negative social economic impacts can be attributed to a rise in the carbon tax. But unfortunately, the reality is that all of these negative externalities will occur in any case. They're inevitable under the trajectory that we are headed on, and under a scenario where we exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius target. So we want to see a carbon tax which enables the government the opportunity to have a measured approach towards these inevitable changes that we are likely to see. Next slide, please. So the socioeconomic benefits of a just transition, just to go into them very briefly, is the job creation potential. And this is actually showing that the opposite can occur from what is being stated by the business lobby. Greenpeace Africa produced a piece of research which revealed that there's a lot more job opportunities available under a 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. So we're likely to see 48 million jobs created in a 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario, as compared to 30 million jobs under a 5 degrees Celsius scenario. And as we've seen already taking place in KZN, the amount of losses that they experienced, and especially the losses that business experienced, that there is high risk for job losses in this scenario, in a high emission scenario in any case. But if we can move to the next slide, please. This was just a tally of some of the damages that we've seen as a result of those floods. And as extreme weather events increase in frequency and intensity, we're likely to see these costs inflating even further across the country. So businesses has estimated 7 billion in damages, while the KZN government has estimated that the cost of rectifying or rehabilitating in the aftermath of these floods is 17 billion. If we can go to the next slide, please. So some key considerations that need to be flagged in this bill is the issue of phase 1 and its extension. These extensions have allowed for these carbon majors like Sasol to avoid up to 95% of its tax obligations. And we are calling for this phase to be brought to an end. If we can move to the next slide, please. as a number of these carbon majors have already enjoyed incentives in the form of fuel levies, as well as the recent conflict, which has allowed for them to earn record profits. So we're asking for a carbon tax to be implemented and prices to increase to a lot for these funds to be able to support a transition. To highlight section 6.2c, there is an issue of a double incentive that has been proposed there. This enables the carbon majors to be able to claim funds for allowing for renewable energy that they have brought online. So what we want to see is this clause specifically removed from it, because it allows for a double incentive and when they're already enjoying minimal tax liability, and it allows them massive savings. And similarly, it would be unfair if they were double taxed, so they should not be allowed to receive double incentives. Next slide, please. Greenpeace Africa is also opposed to carbon offsetting. This is just a bookkeeping trick to obscure climate wrecking, and we call for the Treasury to remove this from the bill, as it allows for the commodification of nature. It exacerbates the ability for these companies to exacerbate human rights violations, and often they exclude indigenous communities from land management projects. And we need to consider as well that the standards around offsetting are not well developed. Socially and ecologically, they are limited, and they often are not well regulated, and there's very insufficient public scrutiny. So we call for this to be removed. As instead, we call for the carbon pricing as well to be in line with what the High Level Commission on Carbon Prices recommends, which is 292 Rand to 585 Rand, and this is in alignment with 2010 exchange rates. Next slide, please. So we've provided quite a bit of context and in a rush, of course. So if there is any requests for Greenpeace Africa to provide further context or to present the findings of our Just Transition reports, we are more than happy to provide that. And you can just contact us on our website, our phone number, or our email addresses. Thank you so much for the opportunity to make presentations.
Tandile, thank you for your presentation. It's appreciated. Gululeka, is the chairperson back yet?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Thank you, Honorable Karim. The floor is yours, Honorable Karim.
Yeah, can the meeting hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chair.
Yes, we can. Okay. Now, I gather in Polika, am I right? There are only 3 members of the committee connected right now. Am I correct?
I saw Mr. Ryder, Mr. Tutoit, Mr. Muletsane, and Ms. Mamarechane, and yourself, Chair.
Open is also here.
I am reconnected. I've just been reconnected, Chair.
Right. Okay. So, I can chair via here, but if somebody who's connected can chair, so much the better. I only have one suggestion. You see, a lot of the submissions are overlapping, okay? And they're dealing with the same issues. The major issues are around the carbon tax and around cigarette smoking and stroke vaping, right? So when Nkululeko pulled the program together, he did it more or less in the order in which people applied, and then came back to me and said, look, there are others who are coming in after the deadline. And we said to him, no, they're fine, they can come in. Now, the problem we've got is that usually the submissions are distinct. They overlap, but these are all overlapping. It's around 2 major themes. So to manage time, and given the difficulty of the situation with the connectivity-wise, I suggest we take all the submissions, give them their 10 minutes, and then we deal with the same 2 or 3 major issues if that's agreeable to the meeting. What do people say? Because we're covering the same issue after the first set of submissions, then we're going to have an interaction, and then the second set of submissions dealing with the very same issue. So it's overlapping. So can't we take all of them at once? Do people feel? Members?
Yes, agreed, Chair. I'm all in support of that.
In support, Chairperson.
All right. Then in that case, can somebody chair and manage the slots? Obviously, we're not going to be like hard and fast, but around 10 minutes or so. So Dicoleti or is in charge of there? I think in charge of battling. Is there somebody who wants to chair it, or any member of any party? It doesn't really matter. Just decide on a chair. I will remain connected via my cell phone, via Frank Jenkins. I can hear through the speakerphone. Is that okay? But somebody who's directly connected, will you one of you chair and manage the 10 minutes? Hello? Does nobody want to do it?
Oni, I think you've probably got the best connection.
You have the best connection, Chairperson. I'm struggling here. I could try, but I'm struggling.
People at the hotel shouldn't share. No, I think you're right. So who's
Honorable
you're
Njatu?
at home, aren't you?
Njatu, how about you?
Mr.
Can you
Njatu is not yet connected, Chair.
At the hotel here.
Oh, okay. Maybe let's hear the next presentation. Chairperson, are you saying we must take over after you have been kicked out, or you?
I am not connected via Zoom. I'm connected via Frank Jenkins' speakerphone and my speakerphone. So all I'm asking is, can somebody who's directly connected to Zoom chair the meeting, failing which I'll chair from here. But I mean, I prefer somebody who's linked to Zoom. And preferably who's outside the hotel, because you can get cut off again, like I've been.
Yeah, I think Advocate Jenkins can rescue us. I don't know if members are against that. I don't have a problem with you. Whatever gadget you are using, you are better audible and connected.
All right, if I'm fully connected, let's just go for it. So who's next in Kulubeko? If you can't hear me and there are problems, then I think whoever is funny maybe at his house, because he's not, maybe he can check. But can you hear me fairly clearly?
We can hear you clearly.
Oh, let me continue. In that case, in Kululeko, can you help me? Who's next?
It was medical research, South African Medical Research Council chairperson, Catherine. She is here.
That was the first one. Okay, go for it, please. You can have your 10 minutes now. I'll monitor it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you can see my screen, and I have a backup plan in case the internet becomes a problem. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, Catherine.
Okay, great. So I'll just go very fast because of the very poor internet that we have. I also have that problem here. I'll just be talking about the health effects of these products we're talking about today, e-cigarettes, and a brief discussion about tobacco taxation and the impact on health. Just to mention upfront that the position of the MRC, which I represent, is that there should be a flat rate imposition of 5 Rand per mil for e-liquids, regardless of whether they contain nicotine or not. We also propose that there should be an ad valorem tax on the devices and other accessories like the batteries. We believe that because this 5 Rand per mil, it's not necessarily going to increase the price to the extent that it will achieve the public health purpose of the imposition of tax. We want to also recommend that there should be a base tax of 50 Rand per unit. And we lastly, and very importantly, would want to recommend that this new tax should be used to work for health. Working for health means it should be used to help people who want to quit, to make evidence-based cessation intervention available to smokers who are unable to quit on their own, even though we know from the GATS that the majority of the smokers, about 80%, are actually quitting without any aid. But we believe that there are some people who would need some help, and these people should be made, given the opportunity to quit through cessation aids that are known and approved by the WHO. Just to mention that from the Global Adult Tobacco Survey that we conducted last year for the very first time in South Africa, we found out that the people who are using e-cigarette the most are actually those who are not smoking the most. And these are those who are within the 15 to 24 years age bracket. We didn't, the GATS, the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, doesn't look at people below 15. So you would notice that Professor Ayo Yusuf also mentioned about the research of one of our colleagues at the University of Cape Town Lung Institute, showing that we're getting almost 30% in smoking, in e-cigarette use prevalence in among high school students. And that is a very worrisome thing for us as people who are concerned with the health, protecting the health of the nation. And if you follow the news in the United States, you see that they have an e-cigarette epidemic at the moment. And if we are not careful, we are already like very much getting into the edge of joining them in that epidemic, when our young people, instead of being exposed to more things that will enhance their productivity in terms of their the capacity of their brain, are exposed to nicotine. And talking about nicotine, sometimes we hear some of the manufacturers and marketers of these products saying that nicotine is not harmful, the tar is what kills people. I just want to mention that that is not exactly true. We know that nicotine may not have been categorized as a cancer-causing agent at the moment, but we know that there are studies, countless of them, showing that there are indications that this substance, which is known as one of the most addictive drugs in the world, is increasing people's risk to cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, and other diseases. And it also affects their DNA and makes them more prone to having cancer. So these authors of this paper actually made the conclusion that the use of nicotine needs regulation, and the sale of nicotine should not even be made available at every nook and cranny, as we are seeing it in today in South Africa. And just to mention about the effect of nicotine on the development of the brain, if you understand the fact that young children who are in school are making the use of their brains, and their brains are still developing, you would be able to join me in my worry when I see that young people in high school are actually vaping right now, and you know, 1 in 5 or 1 in 10. I can't even remember the figure that was quoted by the previous speaker. But we must understand that if young users start using early, they become more addicted than older people. They find it more difficult to quit, and they also have a higher risk of being addicted to other substances in the future. Just to mention that how did what we know about cigarettes being linked to so many diseases start? It started in the 1940s and 1950s, and it was brought about by a group of different categories of research that were done. And these research pointed to the same fact that cigarettes were harmful, and the very first effect they were found to cause was lung cancer. At that time, the manufacturers and distributors were not happy about that news. And so they started looking for what to do to produce what they categorize as a safer smoke. But if you look at the motive behind the creation of what they tagged a safer smoke, which we can translate to what the e-cigarette is today, they didn't add health. Health of the people wasn't part of it. And that is where the MRC comes in to say, what about the health? What about the health impacts of these products? And so we looked at the 4 categories of studies that were used to determine the effect of cigarettes on the health of human beings. We also looked at what evidence do we have? And I must mention, disclaimer, that it took about 100 years for scientists to know the extent of the harm caused by cigarettes. We don't have cigarettes for as long as even 30 years. And so the evidence is still evolving. But even what we have now is already giving us reasons to worry. And what do we have now? From epidemiology, we found out that e-cigarettes can cause COPD, can cause asthma, and they have been implicated in in causing respiratory diseases. For animal studies, even in animals, what they found is that These products also harm the lungs. They cause a change in the DNA structure. They prevent the DNA from repairing if there's any damage whatsoever. And they promote carcinogenesis. That is, they promote the causing of cancer. For the human body, the cells in our body, what did they find? They found that even when healthy adults were examined, e-cigarettes were causing increased blood pressure, they were causing an increase in heart rate, and even the arteries became stiff. And they also resisted the flow of air in the lungs. This is not a product that should be made available in every nook and cranny as we see it. And one of the best ways to make sure that they are not available in this manner is to make them to make them too expensive for young people to start experimenting with them. And for just to move on, for chemical analytics, we found out that, e-cigarettes, unlike even the cigarettes.
You're at 8 minutes. Thank you.
8 minutes. Okay, good. Thank you. I'm getting there. So these products have flavorants, they have ultrafine particles, they have heavy metals that find their way into the body and they cause harm. And then what are the health bodies saying? The WHO says e-cigarettes are not proven cessation aids. Professor Yusuf mentioned about the studies that we've conducted showing that they have not been proven cessation aids within South Africa. The WHO does not try to make them not to be so easily accessible to young people that they start experimenting with it. Then going on to cigarettes, the Global Adult Tobacco Survey that we conducted showed that we're almost hitting the 30% mark of tobacco use prevalence in the country. If you compare us to other countries in Africa, you'd see that we are way above even the highest before GATT South Africa was conducted. And this is very worrisome. And what does that mean? We need to make the cigarettes more expensive so that young people do not start using these cigarettes, because we know that about 80% of those who are using cigarettes today started using when they were teenagers. So if they are not able to experiment, then we are not going to have adults who use cigarettes. And tobacco taxes, we know they save lives. WHO has said that they save lives, and when they are put into good use, they even help the economy. And so we recommend at least a 10% increase in taxes, because the current proposed rate is just about 5.5%, which is way below inflation rate. Inflation as of September 2022, according to Statistics South Africa, was 7.5%. And we cannot be having a product that is so harmful being sold below inflation, and even the increment is nothing compared to what we have with the increment in other category, other sectors of the economy. So we recommend 10% increase in taxes on tobacco products. I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Then we move over to Vapor Product Association.
Yes, over here. Good evening, members of the Standing Committee of Finance and my fellow presenters. My name is Asanda Goi. I represent the Vapor Products Association of South Africa. And Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. I must also thank you for clarifying the role of the Select Committee in this process. And it is for that reason that I'm not going to rely on the presentation which I shared with the committee earlier, but I will be talking from talking points, if that's okay. I want to address a point, Chair. Hello?
Go ahead, Asanda.
Oh, okay.
There's some background voices that are unavoidable in this situation. We're imposing on Frank, and it's not fair on he's in a domestic abode. So we'll have to accept that. But if it's getting too intrusive, please, will one of the committee members just raise it with me and I'll opt out. So it's an awkward situation. I can't apologize. We're in a hotel where they have their own challenges, and challenges caused by us as government and as state-owned entities. So we are where we are. So let's get going anyway. And then if somebody wants, you can just intrude and cut me off. It's no big deal. Okay, so shall we get going, please?
Okay. No, well noted, Chair. Thank you. Chair, I want to address a point that was raised earlier regarding the potentially distorting effects of the tax between well-off and poorer provinces, and thus rich and poor smokers. The Council Against Council Against Smoking spoke earlier about the disparities between Mitchell's Plain and the Cape Town city centre in terms of the availability of vaping products. This is exactly our fear, Chairperson. Vaping products are already very expensive, and we have noticed that poor areas tend to be very underserved in terms of product availability. We suspect that the introduction of a tax at this point will entrench this very difference. Quite regrettably, this gap is likely to be filled by illicit and counterfeit products should vaping product prices increase from the very high base that they are already in. We also agree, Chair, with one of the speakers who spoke that illicit trade is a crime that should be dealt with as a criminal matter. However, it would be wrong for this committee or any institution to actually believe that law enforcement alone has the responsibility to deal with this. Policy, especially tax policy, should not create the conditions that can make this worse, especially in an environment in which law enforcement is already struggling to deal with the very high incidences of illicit trade. We should also point out, Chair, that the sale of vaping products to youth should be criminalized. This is a law enforcement problem. Thus, our primary policy response to youth vaping should not be fiscal in nature. Rather, we should set law enforcement on a course to arrest and prosecute offenders who are found to be selling these products to people who are under the age of 18. As an industry, we are doing our part, both in terms of holding our members to a code of conduct as well as educational initiatives targeting young people specifically, because we all agree young people should not be using our products. They are meant for adult smokers who are looking for a less harmful alternative to smoking. We should also point out, Chair, that our personal feelings about smoking and vaping should not be a guide for policy making. Rather, our guide should be whether or not the tax as proposed will work or not. We say with certainty, and as our submission will show, that as matters stand, we do not know what the effect of this tax is going to be on vaping behavior. It is not clear what the projected impact of the proposed excise duty is. Further assessment of the sector is required. We asked this when we made our first presentations. We are making this ask again. Firstly, we need to arrive at a scientific and balanced view of what electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems represents for public health. Secondly, we need to solidly anchor the excise proposal on an empirical understanding of the vaping sector in South Africa. We currently do not have that. To achieve both these outcomes, we propose that a study be commissioned to assess and answer some of these questions. How many vapers in South Africa are former smokers? How many vapers are never smokers? How many vapers are dual users? What is the expected outcome of the excise duty on vaping behavior? And what is the public health burden of vaping in South Africa? How much revenue is likely to be raised? And what is the projected impact on small traders in this sector? Chair, we urge this committee to not forget that vaping is primarily a mechanism for smokers to reduce their harm from combustible cigarettes. It was designed by a smoker for smokers who did not wish to quit smoking or who were unable to do so. Our efforts at limiting youth vaping should thus not disincentivize smokers from taking up vaping. After all, Chair, a vaping tax that makes cigarettes even cheaper by comparison would be nothing short of a disaster for South African smokers and public health. So what are we asking? We propose the following for your consideration: that the National Treasury conduct a socio-economic impact assessment to have a clear view of how a tax will impact the industry, specifically small businesses and jobs. We also ask that the South African Bureau of Standards finalizes the standards process for testing of nicotine for products being declared, as the process is currently underway. Until the above recommendations are put in place, we urge the committee to defer adopting the proposed excise duty at this stage by at least 18 months to also give the regulation process a chance so that we have a good, solid regulatory framework for these products, which will be a good starting point. And if the committee deems the tax absolutely necessary, then the industry recommends a tax rate that is significantly lower than the proposed rate and lower than the one levied on tobacco heated products, given that we all know this, that vaping is indeed less harmful than both combustible tobacco cigarettes as well as tobacco heated products. And Chair, I would like to leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You used only 6.5 minutes, but there we are. Research Unit on Economics of Accessible Products. Are you here?
Yes, Chair, we are here. I'd like to please share my screen.
Please do. I won't be able to see it, but my colleagues and comrades will.
I apologize, Chair. It's just taking a little moment. Can I just ask, are you seeing my screen at the moment?
We can see you.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Thank you very much. I just want to put it into slideshow mode. So, Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to talk to you this evening. And we are really fortunate to be able to have this opportunity. And specifically, I would like to talk about two things. The first one is the excise tax on cigarettes, and associated with that is the illicit trade in cigarettes. I think as economists and as policymakers, we cannot get away from that link. And then secondly, I want to talk briefly about the excise tax on vaping products. So if we have a look at this graph over here, what we see is that from the dawn of democracy, we saw fairly substantial increases in the inflation-adjusted excise tax on tobacco products. And we see during the 1990s, excise taxes were increased well over 10% and up to 40% per year over and above the inflation rate. That has slowed down significantly, and after 2012, in fact, the excise tax increases have been very, very modest in real terms, not more than an average of about 2% during this period. So let's keep that in the back of our minds, that we come from an experience where we have had a very significant increase in the excise tax, and for the past 10 or so years, we've basically been treading water. So if we have a look at tobacco taxes, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that smoking prevalence in South Africa is on the rise. This is shown by the study that Catherine Egbert talked about, and that indicates that in 2021, smoking prevalence in South Africa was substantially higher than what it was in 2017, which was the most recent survey before then. We also know that if there's an increase in the tobacco taxes, that results in a decrease in tobacco consumption. This has been set up and has been proven over and over in both South Africa and in other countries around the world. At the beginning of this year, the Treasury announced a 5.5% increase in the excise tax, and relative to the inflation rate, that actually means that the real value of the excise tax has decreased. We would like to strongly argue for a multi-year taxation approach. What we mean by that is that at the beginning of a period, the government then sets out what it would like to increase the excise tax on tobacco products by over and above the inflation rate. And I will get back to that in a moment's time. If we were to have a multi-year approach, firstly, it will create more policy certainty. You don't have to listen to us talking to you on an annual basis, campaigning for higher excise taxes. It will be set as a policy, and it will be understood by both smokers, the tobacco industry, and by the tobacco control community. At the same time, South Africa has signed the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and that Framework Convention obliges us to use all the tools that are available to reduce consumption of cigarettes, of which the single most important one is an increase in the excise tax. Also, a multi-year approach has been used by other countries. Australia has implemented a strategy of increasing the excise tax by 12.5% per year for a period of 8 consecutive years. As a result, their excise taxes are some of the highest in the world. Smoking is very expensive, and smoking prevalence has decreased dramatically. Associated with that, I would like to just talk briefly about what has been happening in terms of illicit cigarettes. What you're seeing in front of you over here, Chair and members of the committee, is what has happened to the revenues from 3 alcohol categories: beer, wine, and spirits, as well as cigarettes and cigarettes tobacco. We have a problem. There's been a decrease in revenues from tobacco over the last 7 or 8 years, and that is very significant, and it is indicative of a problem. So BAT would say that is as a result of that's as a result of the high increases in the excise tax. That is not true. The excise tax has increased very moderately over the past 10 years. What has happened, though, is that there's been an increase in illicit trade, and that increase in illicit trade has resulted in very, very negative effects. So over here, what I indicate to you is how much is being collected in the form of tobacco excise taxes expressed as a percentage of the excise revenues that are collected from alcohol. From about 2010 onwards, this percentage has dropped precipitously, and this is a problem. It's indicative of illicit trade. We are not saying that illicit trade is not a problem. In fact, we are very much aware of illicit trade, and we've done a number of studies at REAP to indicate what the issue is. So we are not putting our heads in the sand and saying illicit trade is not a problem. It is. However, illicit trade concerns criminals and money. It is not primarily caused by increases in the excise taxes. It has everything to do with enforcement, and for that reason, we need to have good enforcement mechanisms in place. Chair, you may remember that at previous presentations, I've asked government, why are we not imposing a track and trace system in line with the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products? We didn't quite know this at the time, but it seems as though SARS was investigating Gold Leaf Tobacco Corporation, and presumably they are investigating other tobacco companies that have been very much involved in illicit trade. And I would like to really compliment SARS for taking the step of actually putting them under curatorship, and in getting a very strong judgment against them recently that will probably result in a very substantial fine being paid by them. Unfortunately, illicit trade in South Africa is very much a problem. So on this diagram, which has been put together by my colleague and is based on a so-called gap analysis, we see that since 2010, there's been a very significant increase in illicit trade, primarily because of governance issues at the South African Revenue Services. Also in 2020 and in 2021, we had the sales ban. We believe that was misinformed and ultimately not positive. But what we see over here is that illicit trade is a problem. It needs to be addressed. However, we don't think that that the high levels of illicit trade is an excuse not to increase the excise tax. In fact, we would strongly advise that there would be strong increases in the excise tax, and at the same time, increased measures to combat illicit trade. We don't know what SARS is doing in the background, and we wish them well in their investigations of tobacco companies that probably most of them are involved in some form of illicit trade or another, either presently or in the past. We would strongly urge government to ratify the protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. This is a protocol that has been put together by the World Health Organization, and it specifically focuses on that thing that is a real problem in South Africa, which is illicit trade. Let me briefly talk about the taxation of e-cigarettes. Thank you, Chair. The taxation of e-cigarettes, much has been said about that. I believe that, well, I've seen Treasury documents that are very, very considered and have done an excellent job in making a case to implement an excise tax on electronic nicotine delivery systems. So the point that has been made, let's try and reinvent the wheel and do all these kinds of studies, they have been done. It's not a case that this strategy is coming out of nowhere. Treasury has done a fantastic job in implementing or designing a system that works particularly well for the electronic nicotine delivery systems. What our proposal is that we would really want to have a minimum excise tax, especially on these closed systems that are specifically bought by teenagers, that are available at relatively inexpensive cost in supermarkets. If we were to impose an excise tax at R2.90 per milliliter, the impact that that's going to have on the retail price is going to be trivial. For that reason, and my colleagues have pointed this out as well, we would strongly propose that we should set a floor of at least 50 Rand per unit so that it would have a disincentivizing effect, especially on those products that are available to, or that are specifically purchased by youth, and that would lead them into a lifetime of nicotine addiction. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Then next is the Department of Health. Are you here, Department of Health? In Kululeko, are they here?
Yes, she is here, Chairperson. She's busy sharing her screen.
Oh, right.
I was just struggling.
Cancer Association, you know the order in which you do, and then vaping saved my life, and then COSATU. Okay, go for it, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the members of the committee and the colleagues who are here. For National Department of Health, we just want to share why this bill is important for us in public health. The draft administration law and amendment bill is supporting the Department of Health goal of protecting public health and reducing demand of these products. And the new generation product, as they are called, including the vapes, are introducing new health harms which have been highlighted by colleagues and increasing the burden to an already compromised health system. So to control the new generation product, there's actually a need for a multi-sectoral approach, including the tax measures that have been proposed. And the Department of Health has recently submitted a proposed draft tobacco products and electronic delivery system, which seeks to strengthen regulation of these products. Therefore, this bill will strengthen those efforts as well. The products contain nicotine that has been highlighted by colleagues earlier on, and which is very addictive. And they also contain many other harmful ingredients proven to be harmful for health, which have also been highlighted. The details thereof have been mentioned. So while these products are marketed as cessation tools to assist smokers from cessation tools which will assist smokers from transitioning from tobacco products, they are also marketed to all age groups and mainly targeting youth and non-smokers. The cessation approach and the nicotine dispensing approach by the industry are not compliant with the current medicinal protocols. So the products are mainly marketed as harm reduction when the evidence actually suggests that they're harmful. So one of the challenges, our concern is that these ends are not regulated and controlled fully in South Africa. As a result, marketing of some of these includes toys that are used by babies and young children. And regulating will cover all these aspects in terms of how they can be accessed. If the products are not controlled or regulated, they will be used by more young people and increase not only the health burden, but also the socio-economic burden. And it encourages initiation of a smoking behavior among young people and easy access by young people. And these products are actually creating a lifelong cohort of vapers and smokers because of the nicotine addiction in them. And currently, the study which was recently conducted actually indicate that those that are using e-cigarettes are also smoking cigarettes as well. So they are more dual users. And there has been a study, and I'm not sure if Prof. Lekan had highlighted that most of the shops are actually located within an environment where a youth from our tertiary institutions can actually access. And whilst the percentage is low of smokers, of the users of these products, we are aware that, as also indicated by Dr. Egbert, that ages between 15 and 24, there are more of the young people who are actually using them. And whilst we are talking about the safety aspect, tobacco-related illnesses is actually costing the country a lot of money. There are estimates from some studies that it's about 42 billion. While we have no figures on the new products that are on the market, the reported harm could actually indicate that the cost will be much higher than what we are seeing now, which is just for tobacco smoking. Therefore, the economic benefits as contributed or attributed, by the tobacco industry is much lower than the cost incurred in treating and managing tobacco-related diseases, as well as the productivity losses resulting from premature death and the main illnesses. So the 2019 WHO report on the global epidemic clearly states that e-cigarettes are undoubtedly harmful because they contain toxics, and that has been covered by the other speakers, so I will skip this part. Now, in terms of how they have been managed in different countries, some countries are treating these as tobacco products, so they can be separated from how we are managing tobacco products and also how we are taxing tobacco products. Some are looking at them as medicinal products, consumer products, electronic delivery systems, or some are even talking about them as poisons. So the tobacco industry in South Africa has positioned them as harm reduction and cessation tools. Whereas if they are, as they are called, nicotine is regulated under the Medicines Control Act in South Africa. So it means they may need to be handled as a medicine. And there is evidence which was already highlighted by some colleagues. I will not even dwell into this in terms of the increase in tax actually reduces the consumption of tobacco products and other products. So I will leave that as well because it was well addressed. In South Africa, the retail price of tobacco increased from 32% to 52%. I think Prof. Kone already highlighted that. And during this period, cigarette sales declined by 30%. So this, for us, it's supporting the narrative that the increase in price will lead to a reduction in demand and result in a reduction in people who are using the product. Just to touch on the issue of medicines and drug schedule, which I highlighted earlier. Schedules 3 and 6, which is what the products are actually supposed to be, are only available with a prescription. So these products may need to be available with a prescription if that's the purpose that they are used for. And this is explained for which they are prescribed, and they should be a professional diagnosis and they should be managed by a professional if someone is put on such a treatment. And clinically, there are specific medicinal products for tobacco cessation, the nicotine transdermal patches, nicotine gums, lozenges, metered sprays, and all that. And these follow scheduled pharmaceutical processes. And the ones with high pharmaceutical schedule follow specific medicinal management. So if this is the aim and what is expected by industry of these products, then they should be following the same protocols as our other pharmaceuticals. So the most effective treatment involves a combination. So you can't just give a person this product for cessation purposes without counseling, without providing a support throughout the process. Hence, there is low compliance of the products that people are buying on the shelves. And also we're saying if the products were meant as cessation products, the industry should register the nicotine that is in them under the medicines, except when intended for human medicinal use as an aid to smoking cessation or substitute. That this is what the Act is saying, that the product, except it is used for medicinal use or as an aid to smoking cessation or substitute for a tobacco product, then that's how it is defined in the Act. Now, concluding
You're at 8
remarks.
minutes, but that's fine.
This is the last slide. The South Africa needs to control the products to reduce demand, and exposure to nicotine addiction and its harms and other harmful substances will be reduced. So unnecessary expenditure on preventable ill health will be reduced. Countries that have higher tax rates on tobacco products have experienced a reduction in tobacco usage. Therefore, it is prudent that the tax imposed on the products is far above the inflation rate. And there's a need to add excise tax, a high excise tax to reduce the demand. We would also propose, Chair, that if some of the revenue be used to monitor the quantities of the e-liquids and the nicotine content to ensure compliance. So that's all what we were putting in front today, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Then the Cancer Association. Thank you all for being so exemplary in managing time. We're very grateful. Just to remind those of you who don't know, we have a team here, a content advisor and a researcher who puts together all your submissions and advises the committee. And between us, the MPs and them, we read all your submissions. So there's no way we're going to vote on this thing, this set of bills, without going through them. So, I know 10 minutes may not be enough, but quite frankly, most of you have done very well in capturing your key points. Cancer Association, please.
Good evening, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present. I think it's only befitting that we are at the end because when you think about the impact of tobacco, cancer, the disease is usually presented at late stage. So I think it's befitting that we are at the end. Oops, now I'm
But
stuck.
you've got vaping after you.
Yeah, but I'm talking on health, so sorry about this. Something happened here. I was too excited to present.
Thematic, but I'm just teasing you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So in terms of the burden on non-communicable diseases, oh, sorry, before that, I'm so sorry, but there's a problem with my slides. Okay, there we go. All right, what is the bill proposing? In terms of there's a 5.5% tax increase is below the inflation rate. The Cancer Association, together with other tobacco control advocates, recommend a 10% increase in cigarettes, which is above inflation. And to secure progressive and significant increase on tobacco taxes, we propose the targeted excise tax burden of 40% be formally discarded. We also urge government to commit and provide feedback on the progress on the ratification of WHO's protocol to eliminate illicit trade in tobacco products. Coming from the disease burden and from the non-communicable disease platform, we take note of the GATS survey that was already presented. The findings was presented by Professor Egby, which indicates a rise in terms of the use of tobacco in our country. Just to highlight, in 2017, it was 19%. And the GATS survey now shows it at 24% in 2021. Definitely an increase in that. So what is the implication on health? Everybody knows lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in South Africa. Global studies link tobacco use to 80 to 90% of lung cancer deaths. Now, when we think about tobacco use, we always think lung cancer, but to everyone on this platform, also remember that tobacco use is linked to over 13 different types of cancers. Tobacco use is one of the top 5 risk factors that can be addressed to reverse the NCD burden. Increasing the tax on tobacco products will save lives, decrease the health burden of treating tobacco-related diseases. A healthy workforce will improve the economy and allow for more saving in the health budget due to the high cost of treating cancer and tobacco-related NCDs. The bill also proposes a flat excise duty of at least 2.90 per milliliter for both nicotine and non-nicotine solutions. A tax on e-cigarettes aligns with WHO's recommendations that countries which do not ban e-cigarettes should tax them. Why must we tax e-cigarettes? Our aim is to discourage the uptake by youth and non-users. In 2018, over 1 million South Africans regularly smoked e-cigarettes. 50%, as alluded to by previous speakers, 50% of the e-cigarette shops are within a 50K radius of a higher education institute. Not surprising, right? Nicotine is a fundamental cause of addiction. Nicotine has found to be carcinogenic in several studies and has widespread biological effects on the organs of the body, something that Prof. Ekbi has already alluded to. We propose a 5 Rand per milliliter and a floor of 50 Rand per unit. We also believe that if we increase tax, it will also help in terms of saving lives. Raising taxes on tobacco products is the most effective policy to reduce tobacco use and save lives. The science is out there. It's for us to now use that. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
So we're owing you 5 minutes plus. All right. Vaping saved my life is next.
Evening, Chair. Evening, everybody. I'm just going to try to share my screen. Can you see it?
Hopefully everybody can there who's connected.
Yes, we can. We can, Kat.
Yes, we can see it, sir.
Over then to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad I'm here because I'm finally going to be able to talk about the actual people that use these products and the actual people that benefit from these products. My name is Kurt Joe. I'm the founder of a movement called Vaping Saved My Life. And basically, the picture that we see in the cover here of my parents, both of them passed away from smoking-related diseases. And one of the major reasons why I started a group was that little boy that you see there, that's my son. He's now 13 years old. My son never met his grandfather. And the only memory that he does have of his grandmother is a lady that was riddled and ravaged by symptoms of a stroke or because of her smoking addiction. Not only that, I also, based on the sins of my past, have been given an opportunity that I thoroughly enjoy representing thousands of ex-smokers who are now vapers, and they all attest that these products had saved their lives and have been able to quit cigarettes using these products. So where are we? This is based on a fact sheet from the Global Adult Tobacco Adult Tobacco Survey. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend. I wasn't allowed to attend the presentation. But where we stand currently now is that we have 25.8% of our population that smoke. 65.7% of them are wishing to quit. And what's most alarming is we actually don't have proper studies or research in terms of what is the actual mortality. Some studies say around about 20,000 a year, others say up to 45,000 a year. So that's rather alarming. And then we look at, for example, things like people over the age of 45 that are smokers, representing 47.5% of that smoking population. And those are the people that are really in dire need to try quit smoking. And then we have, for example, the current rate of 24.77 or 24 Rand and 70 cents is the medium cost for bucks of 20s, which then, in my eyes, indicates that the illicit trade or the consumption of illicit cigarettes is a significant problem. And then finally, based on the same research, is 2.2% of the smoking population is 0.24 million. I'm not sure where the 1 million comes from. I'd like to see that research and that study. One of the biggest issues, and I hear a lot of people referring to the World Health Organization, is that we don't actually properly study smokers or now even vapers. We use various forms of methods of researching this and different studies. So as part of the Empower, the very first part is to monitor tobacco use, and we haven't even created or established a standard way of monitoring the prevalence of smoking and even vaping in this regard. And to highlight that, there's a little block there of all the different studies that we've used in the past when we submit these figures to the World Health Organization. So we don't even monitor these people correctly and consistently. So if we look at the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, another thing is that we're concerned about is if we want to talk about the youth, so maybe we should be making sure that they are categorized correctly. As we see here, we lump, for example, 15s to 24-year-olds in the same category. It's not very helpful if we want to talk about youth and youth uptake and so forth and so on. And then earlier on, it was referred to a recent study, which was a pilot study, and Professor van Zyl-Smit went to great lengths to indicate that this is a pilot study and it doesn't represent the entire population. And to highlight that, that is only 9 of the high-income schools. And I want to know why we, for example, don't monitor all youth on all risky behaviors. Surely we should be doing that. There were also then referred to earlier, I think it was Dr. Egbert said that there is an epidemic or pandemic in the United States in terms of vaping. Vaping has fallen by 50% in the last 3 years, and at the very same time is recording the lowest smoking rates in that country's history since they've been monitoring smoking in that particular country. One thing that we can learn from them is that they do a study of this particular cohort every single year to understand that whatever measures they put in place is actually being tracked, and if it's beneficial or if it needs to be tailored, so forth and so on. We don't do that. So one of the things that I wanted to know, you always say follow the science and what we need to, and the science is out there, thanks cancer. Is that what do these people know, what do these groups know that we don't? And to continue with that, we move on to the next slide. Same, different sets of groups over here, and what's most interesting is that, for example, we have the Cancer Research UK, we have Public Health England, Royal College of Physicians, and numerous other entities around the world that have expressed that these products are beneficial for smokers. So what's the continuum of risk? So there's numerous studies out there indicating that these products are not harmless. Of course, they are not harmless, but when compared to other risky products, especially cigarettes, they are significantly less harmful. And this was particularly highlighted in the single biggest study that was just released a couple of months ago by Public Health UK, which has fallen under a new name. I don't know the full name, but the acronym is OHID, where they've come out quite categorically after the 8th study that these products are significantly less harmful and help many UK citizens quit smoking. So if we compare it to cigarettes, you can see that it falls pretty much in the same category as the accepted model of cessation in smoking, and that's patches, oral products, nasal sprays, and then you get e-cigarettes. And if you look at the right, we then compare it to the estimated harm to other harmful products. And most interesting thing on this particular slide is that we have the former director of Center for Tobacco Control of the FDA, Mitch Ziller, where he indicated that these products could be beneficial if all smokers switch to them, and that's for public health. By the way, on the left-hand side, there's Professor Dave Abrams, a South African professor that now works for, works under the University of, or New York University. And he's indicated quite vehemently over a number of years now that we are blowing the opportunity to rid a 120-year problem around smoking. So if we look at nicotine, currently, you can look it up yourself on the World Health Organization's model list for essential medicines. We'll see that nicotine is part of that essentials list, so that it can be used in the forms of the NRTs or nicotine replacement therapies. We have nicotine replacement therapy, which is correctly stated as part of SAPRA, Unfortunately, we do not provide these products in our public health sphere. In fact, we don't provide any particular services in our public health sphere to help smokers quit smoking. Everything is at their own cost. I know that, for example, there is one cessation clinic in South Africa, and that is at Groote Schuur. But as for services in our public health sphere, there's nothing. Again, if we refer to the World Health Organization, which a lot of people have highlighted as their go-to, we haven't implemented Article 14, which clearly talks about providing services to help smokers quit. And we also haven't fully implemented Article 15, which is measures to protect or to award against illicit trade. So can e-cigarettes, or vaping, as I like to call it, help people smoke? I'm only referring to two of these studies here. One is done, which was a randomized controlled trial that indicated that e-cigarettes were almost double the effectiveness versus NRTs. And then we're looking at, for example, the Cochrane review, systematic review, which by many health specialists out there is considered as the gold standard of medical research. They've continuously monitoring the situation, and they've highlighted that these products are more successful than current cessation products and services out there. And then we've, I think it was Prof. Lekan that earlier indicated that these products weren't very successful in the South African context. And it was highlighted at the 12-month period that a lot of there was a relapse of these particular this particular cohort back to cigarette smoking. Unfortunately, like we've seen so many times before, there's a part of the report or part of the study that's never presented, and that is the fact that the 65.5% of the people that were using these products found them too expensive to continue and were forced to relapse. So these products became too expensive for them to continue using, and therefore they relapsed back to smoking. That is in essence what we are talking about here. These products, making them more expensive, will drive people back to smoking. So if we look at the two extreme products on the market at the moment, on the left is disposables, and on the right is e-liquids that are manufactured. We'll notice that there is a problem in terms of the tax on these particular products. We'll notice that if we provide the R2.90 per mil, and I'm quite shocked that we're here talking about R5 per mil, effectively what this will do is it'll only increase the disposables.
And we're going to read your text anyway, my friend. It's a bit unfair.
Okay, so we can indicate that the disposable products are basically only going to increase with using this particular rate at 4.5%. And these are the products are most commonly used by the youth. Correctly stated, they're completely imported products. There are very high levels of nicotine in these products, up to 50 milligrams, and very low volumes. And on the opposite side, which are e-liquids, I would just use an example of 120 mils. These are low nicotine content products, high volume, and predominantly used by adult smokers wishing to quit.
In the next 15 seconds, what do you want to say quickly? We got your text. We will look at it.
Okay, so we did a snap part earlier in this process, and what we indicated here is the gross majority of these products, consumers will either revert back to smoking, try to produce their own products, or at least get the products from informal sources. So ultimately what it leaves us with is a crossroads. We're either going to force people to try to quit, which we don't believe will ever happen, or a small subset of the cohort or population that can afford it, but the remainder will either go back to smoking. Thank you, and that's just the last slide. Thank you very much. Good night.
Kosatu, we'll be taking questions. Please don't go. Kosatu?
Okay. Good evening, Chair. Yeah, thanks to members for giving us space. upload a document quickly. So Chair, yeah, just to thank the committee for giving us space as COSATU just to make our submission. We just want to focus on two parts to the rates bill. The first one, Chair, is around, well, I think we want to welcome the tabling at the NCP of the bill. And we think there are some provisions we do want to support. Particularly want to welcome the provisions to delay the increase in the health promotion levy for 1 year, just to provide some relief for the sugar industry and its value chain. And we are cognizant of the contradictions and the need to balance between health of workers, of lives, the cost of the fiscus from overconsumption of sugar, but also the issue of the jobs in the value chain from agriculture to retail, etc. Chair, I think we also want to welcome the relief provided for in the fuel taxes as well, to give breathing space to workers, to commuters, to the economy with regards to the record high fuel prices in 2022. But whilst welcoming this relief, we do believe that government needed to go further and to extend such relief beyond the limited period of April to August 2022. Chair, just in terms of the health promotion levy, so we, as COSATU, we do welcome the delay for 1 year in the implementation of the increase in the HPL. This is critical just to give some space for the sugar industry in the value chain, which has been struggling along with most industries in the economy, but also in particular to a flood of cheap subsidized imports, and a correct shift as well in dietary patterns by consumers. The delayed implementation of this increase was in line with the sugar master plan signed by government, business and labor, and we had been surprised, I think, with other parties that the 3-year period agreed to for this tax increase had seemingly been forgotten by government early this year. So we did welcome the delay for 1 year only, because it helps to address concerns and will help to play an important role in giving some space for the industry to adjust and to also avoid further job losses in the value chain. Chair, just in terms of the fuel tax relief that was given by government, I think as COSATU we had appreciated the 150 litre per litre reduction in the fuel price given by government for April to July, and also reduced from August and then phased out. So this really helped to give some badly needed relief and to some cushion for workers, for commuters, for the economy, struggling to cope with the painful increase in the fuel price, and as well as subsequent rises in the transport, food and consumer goods costs as well. But we are disappointed, Chair, that it didn't go far enough, we believe, to help shield commuters from a R2.43 increase per litre, and then a R1.10 increase per litre for diesel, R1.56 for paraffin, and so on in June. And we've seen subsequent increases in November, and we're likely to see a R1.50 increase in fuel per litre in December. Chair, CPI is at the highest level at about 7.4% in years. This has provoked a 225 basis point hike in the repo rate by the Reserve Bank over the past year. And this really has massively eroded workers' meager salaries, bled businesses, has further depressed the economy, as well as efforts to reduce unemployment. So we are also quite dismayed as COSATU by the absence of government proposals on a more sustainable fuel price regime and how to protect workers in the economy from the ever international oil price volatility. We would recall that in September 2018, the former Minister of Energy, Jeff Radebe, had promised such a review and a commitment to come back to the country by January 2019 on a more affordable fuel price regime. That didn't materialize. We have no such announcements 4 years later. We also saw a similar commitment in April this year by the Ministers of DMRE and Treasury to do a further study and review of the fuel price regime. Again, we haven't seen anything. And Chair, look, we're always going to see South Africa being held hostage to international crises. Oil and fuel prices will always be, going upwards, and as we see some bold measures being undertaken by government and business, we think there are some things we can do. Obviously, we cannot do anything about the war in Ukraine, but we think that we need a comprehensive review to the fuel price regime to help reduce costs to society, to the economy. Currently, 32% of the fuel price goes towards fuel taxes and levies, so there is a little bit of space there. We also think that we need to help to ensure the road accident fund is placed on a sustainable financial trajectory. Currently, its liabilities are over 400 billion rand and forever rising. So we think the Parliament should help put pressure on the Department of Transport to retable the road accident fund and the road accident benefit scheme bills at Parliament, ideally by February next year, so it can be passed by this Parliament before the elections And these will really help to overhaul the RAF and address its ballooning liabilities and put it on a sustainable financial path. And this will help to reduce the need for above inflation road accident levy increases every year. It also helped to ensure the funds go to road accident victims and not to lawyers who profiteer. So obviously there are some, as I get to the end, some additional measures that government needs to look at to help cushion society from the fuel price increases. And these, for example, include ensuring that all metro rail lines and transit lines are reopened. These help to take 10 million commuters off of our roads, help to protect food and other manufacturing products from inflation as well. And of course, we do hope the government will deploy the Defence Force, the police service to help secure railway lines. We are pleased with some progress by DTIC about a temporary ban on scrap, copper and steel exports from cable theft. There has been some progress by the NPA in terms of dealing with cable theft and scrap dealers, but much more needs to be done, especially on the ESCOM front. And I think, Chair, also we would need to see a significant investment in public transport to reduce the number of commuters traveling in private cars, and longer term converting our motor manufacturing industry from fossil fuel to electric and hydro vehicles. Chair, so we would hope that Parliament could help put pressure on Treasury and DMRE to make good on the commitment that they made in April to look at a reviewed fuel price regime which can give some relief to workers and to the economy. We would hope government will table these proposals urgently at NEDLEC and Parliament. They have made repeated commitments to do so. We can see what can we do collectively as government, business and labour to help address the situation. But timid proposals, perpetual delays won't help resolve one of the key obstacles to growing the economy, to reducing unemployment. And a more affordable fuel price regime can help reduce our dependency on fuel, protect workers' wages and help spur the economy and reduce unemployment. So in conclusion, Chair, we do want to welcome the rates bill and the relief given in terms of the health promotion levy to the sugar industry in the value chain, as well as the temporary fuel price relief we saw for a few months earlier this year. But we are quite worried, Chair, as COSATU, about the continuous promises of government to move towards a more affordable fuel price regime, to overhaul the RAF, to replace it with the RABs, and to move commuters towards an efficient and accessible public transport, because these simply are not materializing. We think there is a need for urgent action by government to cushion workers, commuters, and the economy from the oil price volatility. And we would hope and want to encourage Parliament to hold government to account in this regard. So let me stop there, Chair, and thank members for the chat.
Thank you. Those of you who have appeared before our committee know this, and those of you who are new need to know it. This is the first part of a two-part public hearing process. So, I know some of you might feel that 10 minutes is not enough, but remember to remind you yet again, I've said this maybe twice already, between the staff and ourselves, we go through every submission and a report is done before we process clause by clause. And then we will do a report subsequently to the House, which we will debate. Now, on Thursday, we will have more time, both for members, yourselves as civil society and trade, to engage further. Now, I want to suggest, colleagues, from the outset, that given the difficulties we've had, most of us in some other form, operating virtually from this hotel and this municipality, that the Thursday part 2 of the hearings be postponed to next week. So between Kolileko and myself, we'll come back to you today. We might have to even use Monday. Is there anybody objecting to that? Rather than have this situation where you keep getting, I think Injadu is still out, Buffalo tried up till about 45 minutes ago, and so on and so on. So can we postpone part 2 to next week? Anybody?
Chair, can I come in?
Sorry?
Can I come in, Chair?
Yeah, sure.
Chairperson, I'm not. Can I come in?
Yeah, of course. Yes, please.
Okay. Chair, I'm not particularly against your suggestion. I think it's progressive, but I want to add to your suggestion that between you and Nkululeko, as you check the possibility of having a meeting next week, also check with the Secretariat for Appropriations, as you know that we are dealing with these two bills.
Just all of that offline. Yes, we have to look at the next 2-3 weeks. Yes, of course, that goes without saying. Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
Problem. The next thing is, so next week, Nkululeko and people from civil society. So having said that, let's throw it open. Obviously, I can't see the hands. Nkululeko will help me. Whose hands are up?
I've got Mr. Dutoit, Mr. Ryder. Chairperson Mahlangu, is that hand still up or? Yeah, I've got those three members for now, Chair.
Still up.
Go for it.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and thank you for the presenters for presenting tonight. As mentioned, a lot of the presentations were overlapping. I'm not a smoker, but I believe in a healthy South Africa. I think if there's one thing that the COVID restrictions taught us was that the moment that you restrict trade, the illicit market starts to flourish. I want to know maybe in the coming weeks' presentations if we can perhaps get feedback from the presenters. What is their take on the fact that when the trade is restricted, the illicit market flourish? I've said that. And secondly, we've seen during the COVID restrictions that the more inaccessible tobacco products are, the more sharing of buds there is. And what impact does that have on the health of people or smokers in general? And the reason why I'm asking that is tobacco products is being taxed to a great extent, and it's excessive taxing that's taking place. And one must keep in mind that although you might have the approach that these taxes must be used for health facilities and to ensure a healthier South Africa, all the taxes goes into one pool. Doesn't matter if it's tobacco products that's being taxed or fuel or whatever, everything goes into the fiscus. None of this is ring fenced. And at the end of the day, with the division of revenue and the different departments that we have, funds are allocated to different departments. I think that's one thing that must be kept in mind. But if we can maybe get your take on the health risks that might sprung forth from the fact that the more expensive tobacco products are the ones that's being regulated, what will people then smoke instead of smoking the real deal? And I think the health risks that we have with that will be a lot larger than only smoking tobacco products or vaping. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Over to you, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. Yeah, so I think we find ourselves in interesting territory once again, the same as we found last year, where we find people wanting to drive policy through taxation and using taxation as a bit of a blunt instrument. And while I do believe that taxation might be a tool as part of a bigger strategy, I think that driving an entire strategy via taxation is not the right route. And perhaps based on that, I think that some of the presentations were a little bit misplaced tonight. I think some of them should have been more positioned towards the health department's portfolio committee meeting and the select committee meeting, and others in the environmental meeting. However, I do think that we got some very good inputs. And just on a lighter note, Chair, one of our presenters today from TAG, Mr. Peter Yuko, might remember me from 1984 as a guest in his house when his daughter and I both served on the mini council of Bedford View. Yeah, many long years ago. But I think that, yeah, there were certainly some interesting comments made on both sides of the argument and things that certainly we can take into account. And I mean, the one issue that I picked up is that no one's actually disputing that vaping is a less bad than smoking. So there's no dispute on that. And yet there's quite a strong push to kind of tax them similarly. And then there's a comment from the same people saying that, you know, because smoking is so bad and so dangerous, then we must tax it more heavily. So they're kind of arguing against themselves almost by saying, you know, because cigarette smoking puts so much dramatic stress on the health system, we need to fund health with them. And I did like what Mr. Yuko said about perhaps calling it a health tax and perhaps even ring fencing it or using some sort of a formula to apply it into the funding of the health department. I thought that was a reasonably good good comment that came through. But certainly, you know, if we're going to say that vaping is substantially better or a little bit better or somewhat better than cigarette smoking, then, you know, surely we must say we shouldn't tax them quite the same. And I think that there's a lot of space for us to discuss these options going forward. And whilst Treasury is getting their toes wet with this first, you know, kind of venture into how vaping is going to be taxed, I do think there's a lot of room for further research, certainly, but also a lot more involvement in the way that we tax these things. You know, and taxing a zero nicotine vape can't be the same as one that is nicotine, if we are to believe the arguments coming from some of the presenters tonight. So I do think that this argument has a lot more legs on it. But Chairperson, I don't think that the argument should be ventilated here. I believe this is a health department discussion, and the health department needs to guide us in terms of, you know, which evil is the worst evil, and how much worse are they, and what the actual impacts are on the health system financially from the two different options. And then as soon as you get to two different options, you find that there's way more than two different options, and lots of sub options involved there. So yeah, the comment that I really wanted to talk about as well is the fact that there were several people said that the illicit trade, you know, it's a criminal thing, and the illicit trade is not impacted by the changes in tax. Well, it absolutely is, because remember, there's two parts to the illicit trade. The one is the trader, and the other one is the purchaser. And once you start increasing the tax that you're charging on legitimate products, you certainly get to a situation where the people are being pushed more and more into the illicit cigarette market as you make the pricing disparity greater and greater. And again, just remember that there is less and less control over the illicit market, and we don't know what's going into those products, be they tobacco, cigarettes, or e-cigarettes. Yeah, Greenpeace, welcome. Thank you. Nice to see you here. I disagree with your comment about carbon offsets, I think, because I do believe that you know, you need to have some sort of an incentive. There are certain industries that will always have an impact on the environment by their nature. We know this, and you know, if we just leave them to do nothing, or don't give them any incentive to balance these things off, you know, then they're just going to pay the tax and think, well, you know, I'm paying for the right to mess up the environment. Where you have them being conscious of their transgressions, if you want to call it that, and wanting to balance it and try and mitigate it, I think that's laudable. And commercialization of nature, I think, is a very drastic comment to make. I did, however, like other aspects of your presentation, and unfortunately I can't read my handwriting with the note that I made, because but it's got a big tick next to it. So yeah, appreciating Greenpeace as well. I thought British American Tobacco's presentation was interesting. There were some stories there about the tiered impact of the tax based on the different products available in vaping, which I think certainly need a lot more investigation, but certainly not by me, because it's not a space where I'm comfortable with. Ms. Chloe, I think Chloe is the correct pronunciation. Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it. Importantly, saying that personal feelings should not impact the, whether we decide we want to tax something or not. There's got to be a little bit of a more logical approach to that. COSATU, yes, lots of things that we agree on. The fuel relief is a massive issue, and it's something that we're going to need to discuss going forward in much greater depth. We have heard from Treasury that they will be looking at the fuel levies and so on. I think that the reality is that we've got a massively urgent review required on the fuel levies and taxes because of the knock-on impact that it has generally to inflation and to all different aspects of our lives. An important thing that was mentioned by COSATU and hasn't been picked up today by anyone else, but something that I would have liked to hear more comment on is about the sugar tax. And perhaps the sugar tax is an important example because in 2018 we agreed to start implementing the sugar tax. I know it's not called the sugar tax, but that's what it's colloquially known as. But yeah, and if one has a look at the sugar industry in South Africa at the moment, it's in ruins. And one has to ask the question: is that a result of the tax regime that's been put in place? Did we act too quickly? Did we act too slowly? And I think this is quite an important question to ask. Certainly, when we're looking at things like carbon emissions tax, etc. The quick introduction of punitive taxes can quite easily kill an industry, and that has got massive knock-on impacts. So, if we do a slightly slower, more measured introduction, it does allow people to adapt and to change things as they go along. But yeah, I really want to say that I was very impressed with a number of the presentations. Mr. Yo's one, certainly I enjoyed the passion in that as well, and most appreciative for it. Although, as I say, I do think a lot of the stuff should be debated more in the health space rather than in our space. For now, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. And Kululeko, are there any other hands up?
It's me, Chair.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me start by appreciating all the presentations, and one also it is encouraging to see the interest in terms of public participation on issues that we're dealing with as Parliament. Is really encouraging. We can understand and know what is your thinking. And Chairperson, from my point, I think we reach consensus because there are issues that Honorable Detroit and Ryder spoke on. I agree with them on, more especially on the issue of, redirecting or giving space for a sector committee like Select Committee on Health to deal with these issues. Because one of the presenters specifically, he said that we are not specialized. And of course, we are not specialized in as far as health is concerned, because we said we must be scientific when we speak about these things. And I think I want to support what the other speakers have said, and also agree that it needs to be reinforced so that it can be used for health. My second comment, Chair, is on the issue of young people, youth versus the South African community or the citizens. One of the presenters was focusing on young people as if the target is for young people. We need to stop young people by introducing laws so that they can be enforced. And I want to disagree with that take, Chairperson, or view, to say, of course, the youth is the future. We have to invest in them. But then we cannot say we disregard other categories and focus on young people. And if you say you under 18, it is written on these boxes of cigarettes that they are not allowed to buy them. The incident that happened in the Eastern Cape at a tavern, young people who were below 18, they were found to be in a tavern and they were killed. They were part of the incident that happened there. My own take, Chairperson, is that it needs to be increased. We need to make it difficult for young people to access it. We know we cannot stop it at all unless we scrap it. But for now, if we say we increase, we are saying we are making it difficult. I want to agree with that view. Comrade Matthew, I don't know if you haven't said, maybe it's because I was kicked in and out, I might have not heard you. On the issue of workers, one of the presenters said there will be no job losses because only it's machines who are doing these things. I've never been in a cigarette factory. I don't know how it's done. But my common understanding from a layman's point of view is that a machine is operated just like a computer. They are told what to do, how to do it. They are programmed. Obviously, people will lose jobs if we say, let's discontinue doing this. People are not going to lose jobs. I tend to disagree with those views. Those are my take, Chairperson. And I think because this is still a process, one will continue engaging as you propose or directed, Chairperson, that let's take it to next week and not take more of your time and that of the members and the participant. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yeah,
and thanks, Advocate, for helping the Chairperson with your gadget.
Yeah.
Hi, Chair. I still have a hand from Mr. Ryder.
Oh, yeah. Now, what happened was I did try with, I think, 3 of you, and I couldn't reach one on the phone line. Then I said, Frank's at home. All right, Frank, I will apologize to your family then, because maybe they were restrained because of the speakerphones. Look, is anybody else want to speak in Kulileko?
It was Mr. Ryder, Chair. I'm not too sure if he still wants.
Go for it, Dennis.
No, I had my say, Chair. Thank you. I'm covered.
All right, in that case, then I'll come in. Look, firstly, obviously, it's not my decision subjectively to postpone it. It's the objective circumstances we're facing this evening. And so next week, we might have to use Mondays in the weeks ahead and Fridays too, but we have to finish our program. So that we can discuss offline. But we will notify the stakeholders when part 2 of the hearings are within the next 48 hours. So what I would like to let those who are new to this committee know is what happens then is when we meet in the second part of it, National Treasury will reply to what you're saying. Then you will reply to what National Treasury says. And then we open up the discussion. National Treasury might want to come in before that. And then we listen to both sides and then we process matters. So that's how it will be done. But now, in respect of today's hearings, I think overall, and I think others are saying this too, I mean, I really think it's a very high quality, actually. I mean, overall, and in fact, all of you, in different ways, presented very good inputs. So thank you for that. For those of us who've been in the family of finance, the two of us, that's particularly much longer than myself, a lot of the issues we've heard in different forms before. So it's not new to us. And vaping has become bigger in the last 3-4 years, maybe 5 years into our committee, but a lot of it we heard before. We had, you'll recall, extensive hearings, for example, on the sugar beverages thing. And the matter of smoking and vaping has been on the agenda every public hearing, actually. It's dealt with far more on the National Assembly side than we do it here in the NCOP side for the reasons I explained at the outset. But also new things get brought up. So we learn a lot more. And I think personally, although I've been around for a long time as well, since 2014 in the sector, but I know of these issues of my other roles and as an individual citizen of this country. I think there's a lot of new things that came out. But fundamentally, we're dealing with the same issues. I'm not sure how we progress from here, because my sense is that we are stuck in our respective areas, both members of parliament and different stakeholders on the different sides. And it's more than two sides in a way, although it's crudely said two sides, but it's more nuanced than that, I think. So we have said this before. So when we have these discussions, I don't know, but we need to think through, both from the side of civil society and ourselves as parliament, how do we manage these hearings and these discussions without like repeating maybe 70% of the issues and each of us being stuck in our pigeons. We have concessions here and there, but broadly, we don't seem to be moving substantially from where we were 5-6 years ago. In my view, new things do emerge, but the fundamental issues remain. And maybe that's the way it is in every parliament in the world on these issues. And we keep saying to our colleagues from civil society that these are trade-offs. And how you secure the trade-offs is really what we do. Now, I agree with those who say that I'll say although I learned a lot, and I'm sure my colleagues did in the committee. Well, more than most hearings, I think the issues raised here are really not belonging to this forum. Partly they belong to health and the policy issues. We deal with the tax issues. And we guided on policy issues by the Health Select Committee and Health Portfolio Committee. And then we say, okay, that's the policy. This is what the majority of scientists are saying. So what do we do? So I do agree with those in this place, but also I think there's another thing, and Parliament's legal services interests help us with. What has anybody said here that deals specifically with how these tax bills impact on the provinces? Or what has anybody said about how it impacts differentially on the provinces so that provinces benefit and others lose out? I haven't heard anything. One colleague of ours said, well, it happens in every province. That could be said about anything and everything because we are one country. And yeah, everything happens at the local level and in the province. So, maybe in Kulileko or the content advisor, the researcher, the legal services unit and ourselves as a committee, as just a committee, need to discuss the way we pitch our advert public hearings. Because it seems to me that a significant part of the hearings we had is really a debate that should take place in the National Assembly. Because we don't have the authority or power to make the changes that I think people are hoping for. And what happens is people come to Parliament, and I think the committee is right, it's wonderful to have 13 submissions. But then they get frustrated with us and they say, we come there, we make submissions, and then nothing really changes. But the point is we're limited by the Constitution in what we can do. So when we pitch our public hearings, maybe in Kulileko we now have to say, on the tax bills, as they relate to the consequences or implications for provinces specifically, and maybe a further consideration of the national issues is what we can do at the most. So I really think we need to look in that. Frank, you have to help us with the legal and other implications of this, because it's wrong to make people feel they can come here and get what they couldn't get in the NA, or what they chose not to take up in the NA. I don't know, and Treasury must tell us, how many of those who made submissions today actually went to the NA? And if they didn't, they must tell us when we meet in part 2, why they didn't go to the NA. What were they hoping to do when it's not a 76 bill? But nothing stops it. This is their parliament. This is the forum for debate and discussion. But ultimately, you are stakeholders. It's not just a talk for a shop, right? You have concrete goals you want to achieve. And if that's what you're doing here, I mean, there are intellectual ethics about whether, vaping is as bad as made out, so on, the harmful effects of smoking, for example, and the pros and cons of carbon tax. But at the end of the day, you have to achieve something. And if you want to achieve something, you have to go to the correct forum. And when you go to a second forum like ours, you must be precise about what you want to achieve. Because my question to you, rightly as a chair, it's my job, is to ask, okay, so all that you say is wonderful, and we agree with most things you might say. We might say we agree with, but at least, enough things to say that each of you has got something. What are we going to, so the question then is, so how does it impact on the province? Then, I think though the value of what you're doing is you're enhancing our ability to understand these issues, and our ability when we talk to our colleagues and comrades on the NA side to say, look, these guys came and made this submission, and it's good, can't you please look at it? Then in the report to Parliament, so I think I'm urging Esther and the team, in the report to Parliament, even when we say, look, there were very few issues raised that impact directly on the provinces. And secondly, we think that these issues should be tabled at the NA, wherever are compelled by the following points. And then by the time we reach the end of the discussion, the committee will guide you and say, these are the 6 or 7 things we feel strongly that the NA should consider. And we urge the stakeholders to go there in February and raise these issues. There are a few things here. I do think to say there are no job losses, really is something that's untenable, really, the tobacco industry with the collapse. We have to take into account workers, the high levels of unemployment. The same applies to carbon tax. The same applies to sugar beverages. We've raised this. I like I think they were very good, very, very good inputs here. I really like the terms of praise. I'm not going to go through it, there isn't time. But for example, the nascent market with more unknowns than knows. I don't know if this is a unique expression to yourselves, but I would have more unknowns than knows. And there are many other things to turn to. And we're hovering at about 9 o'clock now. We still have added extra hour. So we've got 13 people here. And look, I don't decide that there are only 60 seconds in a minute. So you've got 120 seconds, which will take us to 9:30. But remember 2 things. One, you can write to us and we'll give you up till Friday noon, right? To write a 2-pager and respond to all the issues members have raised. A 2-page would suffice, clear bullet points, but you're going to go to 3 pages, fine. We should have it by, hopefully, let's say 5 p.m. on Friday. So you can reply in writing to the comments made by the 4 MPs. 2, you're coming back next week if you can. It'll probably be Tuesday, but may even be Monday. We'll negotiate. Tuesday was our slot anyway, but we'll juggle that out. So we'll let you know in the next 48 hours whether it's Monday or Tuesday, or we'll take exemption from the House. We'll have to do that. I'm sure particularly your committee will have to do it too. And the chief is open to these ideas. All I'm saying is that you will also get another chance in part 2. So I'm going to do exactly, I hate doing this, by the way. I get me no pleasure. And it's fine on one's mind, really. But I'm going to be mechanical. Here it is. You can time yourself, and we bring it starting from the first input. And if you get lost because of connectivity, fine, we'll give you the credit next week. Okay? So fine. Let's go for it. The medical, the first one is, hang on. I'm just trying to organize here. Right. The first one is, Medical Research Council. Okay, you got 2 minutes. And then you can write to us and be with us next week. Okay,
before that, Chair, sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Please pardon me. Before that, there's something that I wanted to say. to comment on. I'm not going to take long. For those who were positive and are against the usage of tobacco, I'm really proud of you. I'm saying bravo, and I'm just asking myself whether during the lockdown, when tobacco was also banned, were they brave enough to say it? Because most of the people or most of the organizations were against government for taking that decisions. And for them as stakeholders to come out to say, this is not healthy for our people, and also facing the kind of illness or virus that is before us is going to make to worsen things. I'm just saying, Chairperson, to say we need to see them in all the situation, and their interest makes us wiser to know how is the public thinking. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, good. Thank you. 2 minutes each, please. Remember, you're right in choice, and you're back with us next week. Choose to, and we'd like you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Dr. Catherine Egbe from the SAMRC. Just to respond to Honorable Dikelede's comment about the lockdown ban, of course, the SAMRC was fully with the government on that, and we submitted affidavit to the court cases where the government was taken to court by the in the two cases that were in court. So we've been on this trying to encourage many people as possible to stop smoking, because it's good for the health in whatever way you want to look at it. So thank you very much for that. I just want to respond by saying just one point that I want to respond to. If smoking cessation, or if cigarettes are so helpful to e-cigarettes are so helpful to smokers, as some of those in the other camp have mentioned, the right thing to do is to register them as cessation aids. And when they are registered, they will be treated like cessation aids with that quantity of nicotine. The Department of Health mentioned that they are supposed to be regulated by the Medicines Control Act. They are not currently following that act. They are disobeying that act already. So we want to call on this honorable committee to understand that there's no way that a sick nation will produce tax enough to generate jobs. We want people that are healthy. We want people who, when they go to work, they won't be needing to take excuses to go treat themselves, or they won't be dying off early and reducing the manpower of the country. So I want to say very humbly that health is linked to finance, because someone who works is the one who will be able to generate tax. So that's why we bring the health discussion, because tobacco control is supposed to be a multi-sectorial approach when you want to do it, because you can't, no department can do it alone. It's been proven in other places that taxation is important to reduce use. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Greenpeace.
Thank you so much. I think, especially provided the guidance that you have in terms of how we can speak specifically to the NCOP, advocating for higher taxes from the NCOP would allow us the opportunity to mitigate some of the harms that we're seeing already in the health space and the cost on the health sector as a result of the climate crisis. And we ask that the NCOP advocate for the removal of Section 6(2)(c). We also ask that there is a focus that is given to the lack of standardization in the carbon offset markets, as this could potentially impact rural communities in provinces that are mostly rural, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and this could potentially affect your communities that you are servicing. So we just ask for those three things: removal of Section 6(2)(c), as well as advocating for higher carbon tax prices. Over.
Thank you. Life after coal.
Honorable Chair, we'll rest here for now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is National Council Against Smoking.
Honorable Chair, thank you again for the opportunity. I think it needs to be made clear the economic impact and imperative for and property tax, 1 in every 5 deaths of those who are older than 35 in South Africa is associated with tobacco-related illnesses. So these are people who are economically active, and we should not forget that. Secondly, I do not believe that we do not have enough, or we do not know enough about e-cigarette to act. And I think it's just disingenuous to suggest that we don't know. And we already know there are 250 million milliliters. That's the detail of what we should be knowing. So it's not true, and it's disingenuous, but we would be responding accordingly. And importantly is the fact that we would recommend the change in the current proposal to move to a 50 Rand flag to protect those young people, because 2.90 Rand for the 2 mil is just an increase of 5 Rand. I mean, that would not stop those kids. And it is urgent that we act now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Tobacco, alcohol, and gambling advocacy.
Thank you, Honourable Chair and Committee. The question is tax, but that's not the real question. The real question is how we want to use the tax to achieve a goal. And what is the goal? There are multiple goals. First of all, to make tobacco products and electronic devices less and less affordable. And the way we do that is increase the retail selling price using the tax, so that the retail selling price increases by at least inflation plus 15%. And the goal is to reduce smoking, get more people to quit, get more people never to start smoking, especially the youth. And then we reduce deaths, we reduce public health care costs, we reduce pollution, we reduce waste and the cost of waste removal, and we free that money that is used in all those areas for the real important things that we have: education, better healthcare costs, and all the things that are so vital to our communities. So use tax as a tool to achieve the goals that we really want to achieve and save South Africa. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Treasury Younger and yourselves, can you reply to this request that keeps coming up, that we ring fence the tax we get for health? Now, the committee, I think if I recall correctly, particularly in the last term, we supported it, but finally gave in because of Treasury's explanation. So Treasury, can you reply on Monday or Tuesday, whatever it is, on why you're opposed to ring fencing, not only for this, but generally? I know your answers, but I think it's better you explain. Okay, next, please, is PAT.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I think the one thing that needs to be said is tax on paper doesn't mean tax in the pocket. And again, without an effective, robust excise framework, nothing will be collected and there will be fiscal evasion. So the bigger question here is, how will this tax be collected if the DIY segment is dealing in excisable products? There's no guidance currently on how they will register, no guidance on how the system will work. And again, we need more time where all industry participants are consulted so these issues can be understood. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, please. You know the order. It's Just Share, Vapor Products, Research Unit on Economics of Excise, Civil Products. Go for it, please, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. We want the carbon tax to be significantly strengthened so that it ensures adequate GHG emission reductions, and we've set out what the experts say that those adequate reductions should be, or at the very least, government should stand firm and not cave to further corporate lobbying in relation to the tax rate.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the Vapor Products Association. We are very glad, Chair, that there have been numerous comments on the fact that many of us spoke about the health aspect and very little on the fiscal part. And I think it is because that we've decided to start with something that should have waited for the industry to be regulated first. This matter has not been ventilated with the Committee on Health. There are many issues that still need to be ironed out. And I think that is why at this forum, you're finding most of us are talking about the health. So what we had asked right from the onset is that get a regulatory framework in place, give the regulatory process a chance to unfold first, get standards in place, and then we can start talking about excise, because it feels like we're starting with something that should be right at the end when we should be speaking about the health and satisfying ourselves with classifying these products. And another important part I'd like to just respond to very briefly is the issue of medicine and vaping as a cessation tool. Vaping products are consumer products or alternatives to smoking. That some smokers use it as a complete substitute to smoking is coincidental and a very welcome benefit as far as we are concerned. The industry does not see vaping as medicine. It also does not market the products as such. However, it does acknowledge growing evidence that vapes help smokers quit smoking. So it is not a position that the industry has taken to market these products as medicine, and we will not be doing so. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Madam. Research Unit.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is Conrad van Walbeek. South Africa is a member of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. The FCTC, as it is known, is an evidence-based treaty. So the proposals that are being proposed by the FCTC and the commitments that we have made as a country are following the evidence. As a research unit that is evidence-based, we follow the science. The science is very, very clear. An increase in the excise tax causes an increase in the retail price, which causes a decrease in consumption. That is the law of demand. We see it in all products. We also see it in tobacco. We see it in vaping products and so on. For that reason, an increase in the excise tax is a particularly effective way of reducing the demand for these products. We have seen this in the past, and we have seen it even in the present. The big thing that we would really want to emphasize is that within that kind of context, we need effective ways of reducing and limiting the illicit trade, which, yes, there is an incentive for it, but there's an incentive for tax evasion at all levels. Most people don't like paying taxes, and for that reason, there are good systems in place to avoid and prevent people from evading the taxes. The same principle applies to tobacco products and vaping products as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, next please, the Care Department, and then it's Cancer Association.
Thank you, Chair. Just to touch on a few issues. One, during the lockdown, when there was a ban on tobacco, it's a pretty fun from UCT did not talk about this. A huge number of people stopped smoking because of access and the price issue during the time. And I think for us, it just showed that even though there was this illicit trade, there are people who decided they are not going to change their brands, they'd rather stop smoking during the time. The second aspect is that when you put policies like this in place, you are not expecting that 100% of people will stop buying cigarettes. There will be a huge number of people who stop buying. So that reduction is important, even if you are not expecting 100%. So the tax measures do work for some people. When the price is high, they will not afford. The third aspect is that it's important to realize that what people are saying, we need to educate the public. If you can't educate, if you are not creating an environment where people will be discouraged to buy cigarettes so that you have less cigarettes and even these e-cigarettes. So you need to create that enabling environment that discourages people to have access to the products. The fourth aspect is that any delay in implementing these measures, it means that more people will be addicted to the product. So in future, if we delay by a year or two, you are creating an environment where more marketing will happen, where people will have more access to the products because they'll be affordable. So from our side, we are saying the sooner these measures are implemented, the better it will be for health outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think Cancer Association also rests with the previous speakers in terms of an increase in tax will definitely help to bring down the smoking rates, which will definitely have an impact in terms of the health burden, which is, we don't think that you can separate the two. At the end of the day, it's about addiction. It's about increasing the tax so that we get people to stop and to provide the support to help them to stop as well. So I think definitely an increase in taxation will definitely help us to bring down the smoking rates. And in terms of e-cigarettes, we are extremely concerned about the youth and their addiction. And therefore, we're hoping by putting in a tax on e-cigarettes will help to reduce the rates among the youth. Thank you.
The next person, please, the chair is, we've just lost the chair. I'm sorry, I'm trying to phone him again.
It was Kosatu.
Okay, Kosatu.
No, thanks, Chair. I think, yeah, just quickly, thanks to members for the questions. I think to the questions around the issue of tobacco and the tax and restrictions. Look, I think, I mean, as Kosatu, tobacco is a problem. It's a problem in terms of people's health, a cost to the fiscus, a cost to workers who can no longer work, who die prematurely. And, you know, if we had our way, we would simply ban it. But in reality, it's very different. You can't ban it. And I think we saw with the ban in 2020, all it did was to fuel an illicit market. It denied the state revenues that it needs to provide for public services. We think it actually spurred a potential collapse in the sin tax regime, which we wouldn't want. And that actually helps to, you know, to make it easier for young people to come into to smoke, etc. So I think for us, Chair, it's critical to have the right balance. We think there's quite a few things that need to be done. We need to tackle the illicit flow of cigarettes, which has been rising at alarming rates. But we'd rather have a legal regime that we can deal with that will pay taxes to the state, that to help to try to address consumer behavior. We think there are things we need to add, for example, like in the tobacco bill, which I hope can come to NEDLAC into Parliament soon. We hope it will include issues like track and trace, increased penalties, including imprisonment for people who sell cigarettes illegally, and to see how can we try to nudge consumer behavior in the right direction. So we think we need a smart approach. Chair, I think it was Honorable Mhlangu about jobs. Now, there is jobs in the tobacco industry. There's about 500 farms. There's jobs in the plants, the distribution, the transport, the retail sector. So we need to have a bit of a just transition. And of course, we have a 44% unemployment rate. But I think for us, it's about finding the right balance and trying to have the right just transition. Similar with the health promotion levy, we recognize that the health promotion levy had correct health objectives, but the reality is we have about 70,000 jobs in the value chain. So it's about kind of protecting those jobs as we transition to a healthier diet and so on. I think the real threat for us in terms of the sugar industry, Chair, has actually been from the cheap subsidized imports, which have been flooding into the economy from Brazil and other places. And that's why there's been the master plan, was trying to see about a partnership between government, business and labor to see what support can we give to the industry whilst we transition to healthier products. How can we buy locally produced goods, give support on some of the high cost ingredients for the industry, like electricity, water, insurance, and so forth, to see what can we do, because the real threat, I think, there is around the flood of imports. I think the last question is just, Chair, to Honourable Ryder. I mean, we raised the issue of the fuel price regime with Parliament, with yourselves, because we think Parliament has got a key role to put pressure on government to see what can be done to help cushion workers, businesses, the economy. The government does control the fuel price regime in terms of the tax element, which is 1/3. So we think there is space and there's a need for us to look at what support can we give to the economy. And I think also to hold government accountable to Honourable Karim. The previous Minister of Energy, the current Minister of Energy, and the current Minister of Finance have all made commitments to the nation about giving some space around the fuel price regime. We think that Parliament should help in the reports to put that pressure on it. But I think also in terms of the longer term interventions is about the Department of Transport also playing its part around the Road Accident Fund and the RAPS bills. So we help kind of lessen that pressure on the fuel price regime. And of course, also to the security cluster in the Department of Transport about what are we doing to protect, to save, to rebuild transit and metro rail, because those are also key kind of protections to consumers from fuel inflation for transport and for goods, etc. So I think, let me stop there, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay.
for once you exceeded your time, but fine. Look, firstly, one of the things you have to think about as civil society, can I be heard? Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, you are.
Hear you, sir.
We round up. Firstly, my observations are one, that we're just too polarized here. You're not helping Parliament, quite frankly. Each of you is stuck in your particular videos. I can understand you lobby groups, you civil society NGOs, and you have one or two sort of aims and you stick to it, but you also have to compromise. Otherwise, we're going to carry on having this discussion. Each side needs to be a bit conciliatory to the other. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that it's a process. It's not something that's going to be resolved overnight. And as new studies are done, as new science emerges, so to speak, or further research, we need to tinker with what we do and move on. But we have to look for trade-offs, and you have to help us. And I think, regrettably, but understandably, we're too far too polarized. So you're not going to help Parliament to secure trade-offs. But think about that and try to make one or two concessions to the other side. You stick by broadly what you think. That's my suggestion. You don't have to listen to me. You're not obliged to, but I think to help Parliament, you might want to do that. But secondly, let me just say, once again, like others have, it's been a very, very good quality set of inputs, okay? And you've been very exemplary. I really thought it was going to be difficult to manage this meeting. You made my job very easy in chairing. So I thank you once again. In fact, besides two of you, and amazingly, one of the people who never usually exceeds his time, exceeded 2 minutes. The rest of you were under 2 minutes, but you were so astute in managing your time. That too is a reflection of the quality of your inputs. I think you answered the questions very, very well in less than 2 minutes. Again, it's a reflection, let me say, of the quality of your inputs. And it's very impressive. It's uplifting, really. And I thank you for that. As to what we can and can't do, we explain the parameters. And what we will do, you'll see next week and onwards. Thank you very much once again. Thank you to the members. I want to let you, for practical reasons, you have to make your way very soon to deal with the last aspect of today's event. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. See you next week. Bye. And thanks for flying.
Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Kululeko, is the chair saying we are not meeting on Thursday?
Also, thanks to all of you. Bye then.
Thank you,
Yes,
Chair.
yes, Yanga.
Kululeko,
Yanga,
the meeting on Thursday regarding response is cancelled.
cancelled, Mama. We will meet next week now. I will.
Okay, if you
I'll
can
let you
please
know of
send
the
an
date.
email to everyone. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Thank you, committee. Good night. Have a good week.
Good night. Thank you.
Night, everyone. Thank you. Bye.